And welcome back. Here we are, our Portal Mountain development meetings, number 49. And we've been kind of doing we're on the part 3 of kind of like a mini-series epilogue of
cosmological concerns.
First development of the Portal Mountain model, and then more specifically the book, which was like a rehash of that Portal Mountain model. And now we're kind of getting into what we've called Portal Mountain Cosmology, which is kind of again a rehash. We just keep trying to like restart and compact everything into like a tighter and tighter unit. It seems to be going forward like a fractal in that manner.
To give the earlier parts more concreteness, to give to reiterate older parts more, to put them into context, basically.
Right, and the whole thing has been a development process in which we're kind of talking out loud to learn ourselves, just to kind of like explore the different spaces, facets, and nuances, and all this. So that's totally natural. Welcome to our development meeting. This is a casual. We always call these casual because we're having our brews. We're keeping it nice and cheerful.
And there's very little. The prep work that goes into it isn't choreographed at all.
Yeah, in fact, most of the time we forget even what we talked about last time.
Well, no, the arc is still solid.
I mean, yeah, there is something, but
there's a continuity.
We spend at most like 10 minutes just kind of like getting ourselves up to speed before we just kind of jump in. And it's been really busy. I personally feel like I've been pulled in a million directions with this book, and then with where the book wants to go and all this kind of stuff with like creating actual organizational structures out of this, because I want the book to be pragmatic, if you will, in the general conventional sense.
I consider the book to be more like the...
Did you get new glasses, by the way?
I did.
Oh, it looks fancy. It looks good on you, buddy.
Thanks. I was out about $1,000 for the whole thing, just to get them.
Holy shit.
Yeah. No fucking coverage, nothing.
For real?
Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah.
I can afford it now. Haha.
That is good.
Yeah, so this is my own personal take on what the fundamental point of the book really is, and that is to give that first jolt of that feeling, that internalized feeling of lack that persists in you throughout life, is not something that is just your personal feeling, and
it's not your fault.
Yeah,
you're not the one who is supposed to fix all this.
So the point being there is that yes, that is a real feeling. It's not something that's just manifesting itself out of your personal issues.
That something's missing, something's wrong. It's all that machine-like and alienating feeling.
That you're not alone in this sense. That this is a persistent feeling across a global context, and that it is not a sense upon which one builds dread and desperation, but rather it is
it's actually something that brings us together.
It's more like a beginning point to use that sense and push towards what is behind it, and how to approach what the actual problem is. So in that respect, the book is supposed to at the very least confirm for the reader that yes, something is wrong and something needs to be done, and that this isn't a unique experience.
Right. And this is, of course, we lead off from that into the charlatan and all that kind of stuff. Like, every charlatan will tell you that. They won't properly describe it, but then they'll go on to continue to be part of that system. They won't,
by selling a trinket.
typically won't have something real to say about it or to move forward with.
Right, they will point out one side of it to exploit another.
Just getting chat set up here. Gonna actually forward the link here to the stream to the Portal Mountain Lobby peoples. And this is a very early session, and we're at about 10:30. Normally we start around 12:30 to 1-ish. So it's kind of early because I'm driving around today. Gotta be out, but hopefully we'll have get a full meeting in, and things will go well.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that the earlier book is probably like to set up a setup for, okay, now that we believe that and want to do something about it, we have segued into a book that could potentially cover the subjects of building of the guild itself, kind of a discussion that we're having recently.
Right.
And get more practical as a secondary step. So it's still kind of education first and academic first, pragmatic second. But I don't think that's avoidable because that's the entire structure of Portal Mountain as it is. You always have that mimetic foundation to reach under and rebuild everything again.
Right, and that's how. So we've planned the book out to have we've broke it up into what we call machines. Which are just it means that we're trying to be very explicit about functionality and not to be wishy-washy and leave things unspoken or unsaid. We want this to be functional. We want it to be real, operational, and all that kind of stuff. So we broke it into machines. The first being I think it was the natural self machine. So it goes self, then ego machine, then medicine machine, and then sentient machine.
Yeah.
Right? These kind of build up on each other. The natural or self machine being just the fact of having a neurological network in a self-referential state where it's helping you to map the world outside. So it's kind of like sitting on this boundary between what's inside the neural net and what's outside, taking in signals, and that just you create a story of yourself existing. That is what it is. It always happens. It doesn't not happen.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, it is the most complicated machine to describe because everything rests on top of that. And so building that foundation of the self-machine is what's taken us so long to get that context out with all of its nuances.
Right.
Because it is quite a beast of a machine.
And one kind of tricky part of that is that it is really self-referential. This House of Mirrors, the Fun House, all this kind of stuff. It does, like, people would complain, oh, you're talking about only your own self little thing, and you're not connecting with academia and all this kind of stuff, which we're trying to, but that's not really an argument against the system that it's self-referential. This is what the neural net does. It is self-referential, so that's not really a valid complaint.
There's a few core assumptions we're running with the help of academia, but we're not relying on academia to explicitly define the more representational aspects, because the point of the representation isn't to dig down into the lower layers, but to expose the upper layers to begin with. So it's about reification in a different direction.
Yeah, so it often goes off the rails for that matter. Like somebody could be in the books, academia, they're just symbol shunting or whatever in a system that never comes back down to what it's actually representing. And that's a huge danger. And this has been my journey, our journey. We're kind of self-learned to the point where we're creating our own representational models. And now we're at the point where we can say, okay, I understand this from the ground up to this point. Where can this link into existing academia now? To kind of shore things up and compare and all that. We have a deep reservoir of experience, of self-taught and all that kind of stuff. You could say to actually reflect these academic materials and say, does that make sense? What is the nuance here and there? So it's kind of a totally different way to education, if you will, self-taught, and it's valid. It's not any different. It can be hard.
It's not valid because we say it's valid. It's valid because it's leading somewhere.
It can be inaccessible, and this is why we are trying to reach out to existing systems and all that, like translations and whatnot.
And the other part of it is that experience is always going to be based on anecdote. So there is a significant horizon to what we're talking about, in that we are not trying to describe something besides experience, but in terms of experience. And so because of that, it's always going to be an anecdotal reference. So the only the only communication that can be had, the only in this conversation, is relation to the experiences being talked about, right? So if we're trying to find a language to model anecdotal experiences in a way that are transferable, so that my anecdote can be resonated inside your anecdote, inside their anecdote, inside everybody's, and this is the same self-referential aspect of it.
It's
so
sort of
again,
like a meta language, which is based on the structure that's doing language itself.
So it's really important to keep that in mind, that not only that we're saying that, but we're also aware of where we can make claims and where we can't. They highly relies on the fact that we're in a boat that's not asking to verify things outside of one's own experiences, which makes it very difficult to talk about proof or any of these kinds of because proof and all of that relies on some symbol shunting, converging.
Yeah, it's really a very difficult challenge. But here we are. Moving along.
Dealing with this different layer of mythology and stuff.
I mean, the attempt is important anyways. I think that we've been working on this so long. A book, to me, is like a milestone. Like, just get something down and work on it,
Well, one of the ways to teach something to yourself is to explain it to somebody else.
To express it, right? Yeah, and that's been our kind of Portal Mountain journey, if you will.
Yep.
Yeah, so these last, including this one, the last three, including this one, we've been going into the kind of pragmatic side of things with cosmology, just really trying to set up the glue that kind of holds things together, the way that you describe, and get people to flock together using kind of like standardized, if you will,
common language.
Yeah, protocols and whatnot.
Protocols are like sentences in a language, inside of the paragraphs of the language itself, right? Phrases.
Right.
Sayings.
Bits.
Sound bites.
Kind of like something that relates a bunch of things together in a small, convenient chunk.
Yeah.
So this is a paradigm. I guess I've also been looking at like organizational structures with like agile and lean and all this kind of stuff that organizations have been getting into, which I find really interesting. One of the kind of
it's the same path. It's the same path I've taken.
One of the like conventions is that things should be made into more smaller, bite-sized pieces.
Yeah, discernible chunks.
Right.
Like to the point of where you can grab it and say, okay, this is the beginning, this is the middle, this is the end.
And when you build a system out of these chunks, where each chunk has a purpose, like a high-level purpose, so like a paragraph even that can describe what that chunk does, then the chunk can be replaced.
Notice a pattern here? I'm just wondering if you saw it. I had a thought about this a little bit earlier, but in this context, chunks are wholes in themselves.
Right.
That
yeah.
So, the biggest difference between a more top-down sort of slotting into bigger, creating a piece of something bigger, rather than a piece in itself that combines to make something
Right.
bigger. That's the biggest difference in the different structures that we're talking about. So
Like holon versus ego.
exactly. So where you have the thought I had about this is about meaning, and how in the latter expression, the pieces themselves are meaningless up and until they're slotted into the bigger mechanism. Right? To which the piece builder, the pieces that are making it, have no access. So they create meaningless things in themselves, and they don't have access to the context in which it has meaning.
Yep.
And in this structure, you have meaning in and itself, in the piece, and because of the larger structure becoming an emergent component of those already meaningful pieces, meaning is carried through both layers, and access is granted to both. And so this kind of leveling out the hierarchy theme is has many things to do with what we're talking about. In fact, our pumpkin diagram versus the ego stack diagram is an example of that.
Right. And so I find it really interesting that our yeah, we're kind of like,
Thanks.
we're right in the middle of something big, I think. I think there's movements towards what we're kind of doing here, and there's like, so we need to take it like just as an example. I was hearing about agile management. Like they keep trying to agilize this
Everything.
corporate structure without actually going full. Like
Why?
What I'm seeing is like, now we need to go agile society kind of thing, and like figure out how to scale that. And this is what we're doing, right? We're giving into the hands of the average person in a neighborhood with a garden or something that they want to share, and giving them tools to like how to organize and make it good and make it work.
See, the reason that this is shunned, that this paradigm is shunned, is because the last century had been all about what's called manufactured consent, in which the theory goes is that the masses cannot and should not ever be allowed to make decisions for themselves.
Right.
That their decisions need to be manufactured for them. This paradigm flies right in the face of that. And I mention this because if this isn't considered properly, there's going to be a world of hurt if you try to make it concrete. There's also that issue with being targeted, right? So I think part of our discussion, for practicality's sake, has to really start concentrated from the loopback guild that forms naturally out of what we're talking about, and then talk about how it does end up connecting. But what we want to try to do is explain that it's meant to not look like an actual organization from the perspective of the ontological matrix. It's supposed to look shift and hide and not really exist to it.
Right.
Otherwise, it's targeted and exterminated for
and
the reason I was just talking about.
We see this everywhere, where it basically the phenomenon of selling out. It's so classic. As soon as you jump onto a certain ship in order to get paid or whatever, and you're like, now I'm set, you get run over,
well, now you're in the pockets of other people.
Right. It's sadly so classic.
Or other interests, rather.
And
other algorithms.
so, like, sadly, I don't know, sadly, but there. So we're talking about creating this membrane, this Guild membrane, to shelter what's inside, but at the same time, it not existing as a thing, in a sense.
Like an organism is part of its environment, right? Like when you look at it in like a full-blown biosphere, right? You don't consider the organisms as not as apart from that sphere. It's both. It's like the static and the moving parts. That's the whole biome.
Right.
So in the same way, you don't differentiate what's in the environment from the environment, which the ontological matrix does. It's all about dividing, subdividing everything into its subcomponents. So what we're saying here is that there is an organism that becomes part of that environment, but because it's part of the environment doesn't really recognize anything different. It's just its environment. It's not. It doesn't have a label for it. It doesn't have a specific
Right.
Dashboard to interact with it. It's
Right.
just a component of it.
And from any individual's perspective, many dashboards to all the different guilds that they may be interacting by happenstance.
So yeah, like whenever the system is recognizing an organized sort of bubble, it doesn't mean that that bubble is there the next minute, right? So whatever it recognized is nebulous, or
Momentary.
Ephemeral is the usual word I go for.
Right. Right. So this ontological matrix, this is what we're looking at right here. It should be up on the screen-ish. Yeah. So this is... so the matrix here is like...
It tries to be concrete.
What we're showing is that there are conventions, there are protocols. We do have conventions and ways of interacting with each other, and we're saying there are two major systems that this can be done in. One through ego obfuscated, and one through holon with a the
Holonic is just holonic. It's whole and in part.
Right.
Context and focus.
Right. So this matrix is where any of us at any moment can be interacting in society, and there's a way that that's done, and things are expected. There's certain messages that need to go and come and go for things to happen. That's what the matrix does.
So I think I can clarify what I mean by it being nebulous is that when you look at the holonic protocols, right, from the systemic perspective, they don't look like they belong to a unified any model. They just look like things that people would do anyway, because people are people. So from the systemic perspective, it doesn't look like anything. From the other side of things, it's a core constraint to keep to those protocols. So that constraint is not
What other
it's
side?
not an identity, right?
Do you mean the ego, the market side?
From the model side,
from the model side.
From the model side, the guilds work as a set of constraints on each other. So,
and that's calculated at the individual.
Those constraints are a negative, right? They're not something you do. They're just some things you don't do, or you lead you to do a certain way to avoid certain outcomes.
Right.
So, it's like you can't target a negative. Right?
Yeah. I like how you put that.
It's defining itself by what it's not doing in the ontological matrix, and then by that, it doesn't give you a targeted thing to dismantle.
Right, and this reminds me of coherence, which has always, to me, seemed to be about things that you don't do, which is why it's hard to identify a participant, a member, especially a member.
It's literally proven a negative. How do you do that?
You don't. You wait. Or you notice
till infinity,
or you notice that this is always being broken, and then they're a little bit weird now and they think something big happened, but they're not breaking that thing anymore, and you notice it, and it's like, okay, something happened.
Again, it's an emergent property. It's never going to be a concrete one. It's a hyperstition. It's not a It exists by its own virtue of being thought of.
So Portal Mountain is a prototype or whatever, maybe, of this type of organization.
Portal Mountain is a mapping of the guild inside of the ontological matrix in a hyperstitional sense. It's like an idealized guild sitting inside of Portal Mountain. So by idealized, I mean nothing. Everything you see about it is just like straight up Portal Mountain expression. It's going to map out coherence. It's going to map out temperament. It's going to map out
Right.
the domains of progress slightly, at least in a kind of a mythological sense, with the idea of climbing the mountain, so to speak. So it has all of these like small pointers about specific protocols of going through the education guild of relating temperaments together, and
these
all
are
of those
universals,
things. Right?
as well.
Meant to be like
these will appear everywhere.
the shape of the
that you everywhere you try to do something more natural and more outside of the ego and the market, you need this education stack. You need to be aware of coherence, of temperament, all of these things that we've been mapping out over the last few years.
So another way to look at what you just said is that it really won't matter the construction of the ontological matrix content, like who the agents are, what the specific sound bites are in the mythology, all of these, irrespective of these, that structure can still map into the ontological matrix. That's what it means. That's what its universality is meant to express.
Right, and that is a really weird thing. But
The content won't matter.
because our DNA is so close and we share so much of our internal structure and how our perception is constructed moment to moment, we can actually reason about universals, and we can come to some of these unifying ideas.
Well, the universal that I like to use, and I actually had only phrased it to myself very recently, is that the mind is essentially the body talking to itself. That's the universal. We're all bodies in conversation with itself, and from that starting point, we can build a narrative myth that unifies that truth, reality, whatever the fuck you want to call it. But it is an experiential, anecdotal reality. Therefore, again, proving it is kind of like not part of the question that we're trying to point. We're just saying, if we start there, what do we get as a model? And looks like we do.
Interestingly enough, we don't really need to. I mean, the way that we've kind of attacked this book idea is that we're saying that we're speaking to members who have already, let's say, gained membership in their own loopback guild, in their own understanding of their mind and body connection in some way, that they feel it, they know it's different, something has happened to them usually, or something is very different to them from what most people perceive.
The linguistics of perception shifts to the point of to a universal, more universalized perspective. So you hear a lot of feeling one with the universe, or getting a sense of how we're all connected. And you get these feelings from astronauts looking down at the Earth, for example. You get like a lot of different...
The overview effect, as they call it.
Yeah, so there's like... It's that shift in the mental that everybody knows about, and nobody can really qualify because, again, the language behind it either exists in some archaic religious context or denied outright.
Right. Yeah, so that's part of our work, is bringing forward these sort of past attempts, the legacy of our past attempts to bridge this divide for people so that they will be more present and sort of undo the damage of civilization, if you will.
So I think I went on this tangent just to say is that when you hear the word Portal Mountain, it is hyper superstitional mountain in the ontological matrix that behaves as the idealized mapping of the idealized guild as a whole, without making references to the individuals, members, or any of that, just the fact of them, and what it looks like from the abstract perspective.
Right. It has a very prototype feel.
And as a map, you got to understand that it's not talking about. You don't traverse the map; you traverse the territory the map's referring to, and that territory is going to be different depending on the content of the ontological matrix, the specific agency in the ontological matrix the ego is taking part of, which will naturally be inside of some kind of ego hierarchy, which has its own set of problems to begin with, and in the context of the ego climb and scraping up to the top and trying to avoid the fires of war at the bottom.
Right. Yeah, which we've kind of beaten it like.
Which is a lot of distraction.
The horse is dead. We're beating it still, but it's
forever and ever and ever. Amen.
Yeah, but we don't actually need to. With our work, with the book, we've defined that we're speaking to members who get it already. We just need an intro that just they can feel it. Mm-hmm. They can feel it. They know, and then they can proceed.
Even members need some reminders.
Oh hell yeah!
Basing it on my own perspective.
Often people feel alone and isolated and all this kind of stuff after having this kind of experience.
I don't know if you did what I did and reread the entire Norse section that I.
No, I didn't go over it again. No.
It's so classically fundamental to the shift in the perspective that we need, because it talks about not looking at the world in terms of its scientific constituents, but talking about the world in terms of its experience and being poetic about it. So the major theme of the entire write-up was that these people weren't ignorant, they were poetic. And so when they were talking about brave as an entity out there, right? And talking about being brave, that was one of the examples that they were talking about. And in our context, usually to be brave is to muster up some courage and taking on a brave role. But bravery as an entity out there, in a poetic sense, what they would do is they would become brave, the archetype itself. They would play the role of that saga.
Right.
So that's the mentality behind the mythological way of thinking.
Right.
And so it's a very different approach to the experiences that are happening. And so the idea that, for example, religion was used to explain the unexplainable is retarded. It's like it's like retarded on its face.
Yeah. So you're actually taking myth and embodying it as if it's literally true.
As if what this story is a repetition of that story in this way and that way, the other way, the third way, which is why you also find mythology evolving in different tribes, in different contexts. If you war less, you have different deities that are more peaceful. If you war more, you have more deities that are just, not so peaceful. Vikings versus the rest of the Germanic tribes that got attacked by the Vikings, for example, let alone the rest of the world.
What a history. And here we are, where we can kind of reason about all this kind of stuff as if we're floating on top of it, and yet the world seems to be captivated by these old, this civilization as it's been building up. The libidinal economy, as they call it, latches and hooks us in every single way on many different layers into this system. We're hollowed out without a core in our center to this systemic machine, and that obviously has inertia. There's inertia to that.
When you said hollowed out, immediately I'm thinking, again, the last century has been about manufactured consent.
Right.
What is manufactured consent if not
So-
the hollowing out of every single individual in the masses into a program that is installed for them?
And the only way this can be done is if it's more like a capstone, a cap piece, a keystone, if you will. Something emergent at the top where even your own decisions and reasoning about the world around you is being sold back as a service to you.
Well,
What
it
comes down
starts
your
with
feet?
language, and if you'll notice, we had to create a new language because the language we have is completely bereft. It is
Right.
hollowed out of meaning.
English, the language of business,
Exactly.
if you
I'll be
will.
right back.
And with that, we'll take a short break.
It is hollowed out just like a soul.
The zeitgeist. Get into it.
No pills today, right?
Not really. Not really. Sometimes there was one or two around. I need to throw another stack in my pack. Yeah. So where we want to go today, I think, is a bit like me. I want to get to programming these guilds.
Well, why don't we start with
But I know there's a progression here.
yeah, why don't we start with what is supposed to happen with the individual members, and then how the emergence procedure works. So,
Proceed.
like, our last topic was basically how we have the square representing the full ontological matrix, the context in which the society in which shit's going on. We
Right.
have people, we have roles, we call them agents, that do systematic things, and agencies pop inside individuals over and over and over again to sustain the system. So it's already working under that ephemerality context to begin with. It's just given a little bit more solidarity, I guess, in the mythology.
Solidity.
Right, the mythological sound bites. Now, so same picture, except we have degrees of coherence involved within some of the players inside this ontological matrix. So what you have is an emergent phenomena of a universal truth, if you will, but popping here, there, over and over and over and over and over again. So this is where it becomes a kind of like a game of numbers, because you need a threshold.
Right.
With enough internal, so to speak, structure, the DNA that we keep talking about, being being within the individuals that are there, that'd be essentially a language that they can communicate through, which sits on top of the existing language to begin with, which means that the message is passed on the same carriers, and only the alternative meaning can only be discerned within the individual bits of the organism that we're now building. You have an emergent organism that also behaves as a kind of a sheltering structure with that communication going on between them.
Are you kind of like referencing the emergence of like fundamental guilds within like normal day-to-day interaction?
Fundamental guilds already are emergent there, because
Well, it has to be, but
the very appearance of the individual members constitutes the emergent membership guild, and the language that they speak between each other constitutes their mediation, and their relationship to each other constitutes their proximity.
right.
So it immediately
Yeah, but it sounds
emerges.
like you're trying to pull this out as okay, let's understand that this is what's happening.
Like how to view it.
Okay.
So you see, it's like nothing changes, but a language gets layered on top of the ontological matrix that sort of creates a new layer above it,
Within existing media.
hidden within the existing media. Yeah, like it's not differentiable on that layer.
Right.
It's only when it's put together that
So it sounds like you're describing like what would you call it? Like
life finds
like
a way.
like an administrative layer sort of appearing, aside from the fact
A
of
layer of constraints.
sure.
Like, you still have access to the same dashboard as whatever agent you are. But now, how you use that dashboard is affected. There are just certain things you don't do.
Right.
Most of those things involve shitting on other people. So it shouldn't be that hard of a sell on its own. But yeah, this is like the most relevant picture of what pops up.
Right. And because normally you wouldn't just find people gathering together to talk about fundamental guilds or fundamental guilds. You would
Explicitly.
find a community garden. And then
Exactly.
within that, maybe people are coherently functioning.
Right. That's the hidden aspect of it. It's the same thing.
It's the same. This is all shitted up.
Yeah.
You don't need to shit it up. Right.
So now that we have that picture in mind, we can see that layer now being divvied up into two sections. The practical one, concrete on the boots on the ground, called corporation, and the overarching institution that binds all these corporations together as a corporation and with boots on the ground. A self-referential.
And the institution is supposed to be something that's kind of taking care of model from the underneath, it's kind of emergent, bubbling up. Demand, taking care of demand, right? So we're associating it with demand. Yeah. And the concrete boots on the ground with supply.
And the circle back is actually in the fact that demands are supplied by the institution, therefore making it itself a corporation.
One that kind of aggregates or assists the bubbling up of demand.
So we, and I think I tried to build an arc of how this would work. So you have the individual demand of skill, right? You supply that demand to the institute and says, institute, so you're now behaving as the institute with a demand. Say, I have, you know,
Right.
the overarching institute has to supply the skill that you're in demand of by hooking you up with the training. Once you're trained, you are now able to supply whatever you're trained for further and aggregate that. So it has like a smaller, it starts off with the building blocks and bubbles all the way up to the final picture in the same way.
Well,
So
interesting how you put it that way. Education is the first natural guild, right? It's all about learning how to do something.
and so the first function of the institute is to supply education. What education of the constraints.
Right.
And so as you are getting supplied with your skill set, you can then fulfill demands using that skill set.
And so we.
And so you hook into corporations that need. So corporations have their own demands of the institute. The institute has people that it's trained, and it supplies them to those corporations to fulfill the tasks.
So we have kind of shifted into demand and supply economics, I guess is what we call it.
Well, that's how it materializes as an actual functional, pragmatic entity. Guild dynamics has always been the pragmatic side of it.
I mean, like we're giving a picture of how to interact in a way that's scalable, that
Scale invariant, actually.
scale, right?
The,
Yeah.
The scale of it is
So that would be the
from the individual to the entire world.
that would be the key. Yes. So a method of organization of taking care of demands. That's what we're describing here, as opposed to the classic ego market corporation.
And I think we never said it explicitly, but profit is not one of the demands. Like profit is not a demand. Profit is
Yeah.
Profit is outside of of this experience. Not surplus,
So-
not surplus. But profit definitely is not a concrete demand that can be made.
Right. Because everyone knows the constraints, and
Well, because it's besides the point of everything.
profit isn't something that that you need per se.
Right, you can't eat profit.
Right.
You can't eat profit. You can't breathe it. You can't. And so we can make a distinction between surplus and profit. Surplus is inevitable in doing things economically. Really, there's nothing wrong with having some surplus, but the profit is surplus for the sake of surplus.
Yeah, I get it. Break time? Yeah, it's Dylan. And with that, we will take another short break here. All right. Apologies, we're back very quickly. So, where were we at? The guild, supply and demand and supply, as we call it. Very opposed to supply and demand. But yeah, we're just describing organization, scale invariant organization, and
Ephemeral. Also important.
yeah, and again, this reminds me of having bite-sized chunks of code, if you will, that are replaceable, modular, that are understood. And these are the protocols. This is how people are working together. When you make things explicit and known, then it can be improved upon and flocked. Like upgrade the group, upgrade the guild with better protocols.
And in every case, the whole is kind of like an emergent afterthought and is in place by virtue of the pieces that are being worked on, right? It's never about the whole being outside of the context you can reach and you just working on whatever little gadget that allows you to function that you make use of.
Mm-hmm. Right. Aha. Yes. Mm-hmm. I like it.
Well, that's the overall arcing picture. The actual constituent guilds, and from the natural guild stack that build up the DNA and whatever, they're really more of an elaboration of where to place constraints, right? And so that supply and demand don't get, or demand and supply, sorry, should kick myself for that one.
Easy.
So that we can basically orchestrate the actual movement of the guild to be in concert with the environment that it's in. Mm-hmm. So the question of context is always at the forefront of every activity and all activities, really. So because of the context, there is a certain route to supply demands, and that route can't be perpetually exploitative of the environment, such that the environment that it relies on disintegrates, right? Like, that's the general idea. I mean, that's kind of like part and parcel of what the problem really is.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because our typical goal is, let's say, profit, which is an end in itself, and it's a laundered end. It simply means like get more money. That has nothing to do with anything, basically.
Whereas the very, very first point in education is immunity, and that very first point in immunity is hygiene. So right away, there is this sort of protocol of constraint put in place of don't shit where you sleep kind of idea.
Right.
Hygiene is like right at the bottom of everything. Keep shit running smooth and clean, and organize around hygiene as you build. So like the next step of nutrition, hygienic nutrition. Also, don't shit where you sleep.
Right.
So corporate farming is already out of the question immediately, for example. Like, because that's shits on the environment for like just a couple of nutrients for you.
Now, I'm kind of wondering what this looks like as protocols, and how do we build an organization out of this? Where is the organization? Do we come up to the archetypes, the primordial archetypes, Is this where we are, like, how do we build,
I think for practical reasons,
like, every guild is...
protocols have to be so. Protocols have to deal with the concept of abundance versus scarcity. With that, I'm talking about artificial scarcity and natural scarcity and natural abundance, which is more of a default. So all of the protocols effectively have to revolve around of sustaining the abundance and eliminating artificiality for scarcity. Again, a contradiction with the way the system works.
But we have our choice as to what we can support. This is kind of like the good consumer theory or whatever.
Yeah.
So we don't have to support systems of artificial
By
scarcity.
defining, it's by what you don't do. So in this case, the idea is to back off of activities. This is where numbers become effective. You need thresholds here. With enough activity backed off, you actually have the emergent effect of improvement on top. But that's all hypothetical, obviously. It is still a hyperstitional construct.
Right. So
yeah, like if you take hygiene to be your most fundamental core constraint, it needs to bleed, first of all, your own hygiene, obviously the body, but your household, your surrounding household, your social interactions, it just bleeds into absolutely everything. And all we're really talking about is being in the moment of what you're really doing. Just to give consideration to the full spectrum of consequences of the activity itself.
Sure. Yeah, and that's easier said than done.
So, mostly is to not be in an autopilot sort of mode.
But that in itself isn't all of this organizational structure that we're talking about.
No, I use hygiene because it's so easy and it's like the first point, and everybody knows what the fuck that is, right? Like, you maintain cleanliness of your own body, your body keeps healthy and runs longer and better. You maintain cleanliness of your household, it runs better. Like, it's just, it
Right.
It flows.
Of course, and one who does that would end up accumulating protocols which are supporting abundance. Naturally. But there is kind of a supercharging function we can do here, which is to go all the way with this organizational stuff and get it down.
Well, this is why we're building the mental picture first. That's the organizational component of, like, that's the DNA in the mind that has to feed every aspect, right? Without that core installed constraint program, there is no common DNA.
Right?
That, at least not one that's as universal. And it's this universality that keeps rebinding it all together. Without the rebinding, it just falls apart like the rest of any organized effort.
And so we're with this natural guild stack, we're kind of saying here that all of these things, they first off, from bottom to top, they build up and depend on what's below. Nothing above can exist without what's below. And so if we understand this in the way that we construct our organizational structures, we know that we're building a tower, sort of, so to speak, in some sense, like a natural hierarchy of causality, right? And this is kind of the DNA we're talking about. So you need to... Education is first. It's about having a map in your neural system, neural
to
network,
represent everything.
to represent things. That's education does that for you. That's the learning process, to get that map. there's nothing. That's the bottom. That's the bottom concrete. That's the bedrock.
That the outside needs to be reflected
Right?
on the inside.
You can't deny it. You can't skip education and just start thinking that people are going to go along.
Right, and why we're saying you can't is because we're literally trying to rebuild the animistic stack on top of the ontological matrix, and therefore it needs that fundamental, code by which to identify itself. It has that self-representation that the entire animistic stack had been relying on and is removed from the ontological matrix is what's being reintroduced.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, reinstallation of the underlying layers.
And this dynamic of a conversation between the neural network map and the world out there.
Mm-hmm.
That is your education.
It's a repetition of the mirroring effect that nature already did.
Mm-hmm.
We're just making it explicit in language.
Correct. I'm kind of getting hints, like I want to protocolize things, or at least create example protocols.
Well, we kind of skipped right from education to economics.
Sure. That's
right,
true.
and we can talk about the different layers that lead up to economics, but it's really about more record keeping and sustaining developments in the layers below. So, for example, immunity.
Right.
Immunity is an expression of education being put to the task, right? Like when you take education and enact it, it starts to look like immunity. And immunity, when expressed inside of a context, starts to look like what you do with the environment for the sake of immunity. And technology becomes a part of that environment because the environment gets changed by
hold on a
utility.
second here. Immunity implies something can be circumvented or destroyed. The thing that can be circumvented or destroyed is the structures that enable existence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So immunity is really pointing towards something... Preservation of specific things.
The organism.
And those specific things, of course, then we would say that is above. This is what's stacking on. We need the ability to sift and sort out things that are not...
Things that work from things that don't work.
Right.
Right? And once that is established for oneself, the exact same process begins in a greater context, because the self is in that context, and so whatever you're doing in the context,
so like, yeah, I'm seeing
it reflected in that environment.
Education
so now you need
as,
to take that into account explicitly.
Education as a generic sort of thing, which can go very wrong and be pointed at who knows how the hell.
Right.
And
So
immunity
here-
kind of pulling in that there are constraints
To what that education
that are
is.
real.
Yeah, so immunity starts
And they
the
can't
definition.
just go away, or everything goes away.
So immunity acts as like a pointer of what education is about, rather than a willy-nilly information dump. So it makes it concrete.
Right. And I know we've walked through this stack lots.
And the more you go up the stack, the more concrete things get, basically. Because environment is a nebulous concept. What is it in the environment that we are interested in? Well, it's all our tech. It's all of the way we utilize the environment. Tech doesn't have to be high tech. It just can be...
Isn't environment like the soup of types?
Yeah. What you get access to.
Right.
And technology is a rearrangement of said environment into specific categories of tasks that are applicable to the environment. And data is the assortment of that tech, the list of things.
Technology is almost like aspects of environment.
The how-to.
In how you're saying that.
Yeah. And data is a reflection of technology by saying, to do this, do that. To do this, do that. It's like a representation of that technology.
Data seems like the end results popping or emerging. Like we want this, it's a yes or a no. Did it work? Did it not?
Data is all of the quantified objects in the environment once you've technologized it. So it's your equipment list, your database of things that you can use to do things. Protocols. At the end of the day, every machine is a protocol, right? So it's a database of those machines. How do you build to make an axe? You know, do this, do this, do this, do this. That's what data is. So in a way, it already exists in the environment. It's just made explicit after the fact by having a procedure in place with language attached. And then we get to the economics, which is the movement of all of these things in the environment.
So, but data is really like quantification, it seems like. And then only with quantification can you have economics, because then you're talking about slotting things into other things.
Yes.
You're talking passing messages or whatever from one entity
so
to
data
another.
Data is the representational, that's the record-keeping portion of everything that we've just been doing.
Right.
So,
and economics is the actual movement of those, the things that are being represented.
yeah, so data is your lore, and economics is that lore in action.
Star Trek?
Sure.
So
data establishes.
I didn't quite get that what you're saying.
Data establishes the explicit myth. That's the story. That's the narrative we're following. That's our data. That's where we're.
Right.
That's the collection of things that we know about. That's our cosmos. That's our everything. Economics is the movements within that universe.
Got it.
Right. It's an animation of that. And that animation is in terms of supply and of demand and supply. What is needed, an adventure, a hero's journey proceeds as a consequence. You know what I mean? Like, nothing changes between guild to guild except interpretation of what already is. So everything is a reinterpretation of education. Everything is a reinterpretation of immunity. Everything is a reinterpretation of the environment.
Well, it depends on it. It's like the things happening below that you're focusing on a higher layer. It's still the things happening below are still happening.
Yeah, they don't go away. They're right. It's just a bigger and bigger context in which they appear.
Right.
And that context becomes more and more alive as we go, all the way up until we actually functionally admit that by computing, and then synthetic neural computation, and then sentience into the machinery itself. And sentience here is the self-awareness of the system built into the system that we're discussing to begin with. So it makes all the implicit stuff explicit. Oh, this is about the self.
So this is a very like experiential feeling like thing. Like these all should feel kind of immediate, I guess. Mm-hmm. Like it's things happening all around me wherever I go, no matter what. Now, on top of that, I'm seeing here, like when we look at the primordial archetypes, for an example, we have an actual corporate structure, state, personal. These are more like where you'd have proximity guilds, like actual entities sort of thing.
Yeah, where you take on concrete roles, concrete identities.
Which are still fitting into this piece, but this is somehow this is more mythological, or how would you say?
Yeah, so this structure is more on the pragmatic side, where the archetypes have more to do with the meta-narrative play in the way you would view the emotional, full spectrum of emotional interaction of identifying and participating and taking on roles and being things, whereas this one is like, this is the context in which those things are happening.
No matter what, it's always natural guilds. It's always
they're both no matter what.
Down.
They're both no matter what,
okay,
because of the switching up. But
I mean that one depends on another, sort of.
You'll find this breakdown within this breakdown. Yes, the sentient machine, for example, is structured to A, apprehend these constraints, but also, so these are so this is the things that I won't do, right? But when it comes to things, how would I structure things I will do? This is the main structure to build off of, to start constructing groupings.
What do you mean won't do? Is it specified what not
So,
to do
so,
here?
so immunity is about constraints.
Yeah, I understand
not,
it's
so
a constraint stack.
the negative. So this is the negative portion that can't be targeted, right?
Now, education, how, like, let's see, how is that negative?
Because education is about immunity, and immunity is about don't do this, don't do that. If you're going to do something, this is this is the constraint path for it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So this kind of covers like, please don't do the following. This list goes when you're going to be on the creative
Right.
spectrum.
Yes, that's
This
a good
is
way.
this is the building blocks you've got to work with.
That's a good way of juxtaposing this with our primordial archetypes here, as we've called them.
Mm-hmm.
In this chart, this is where you're taking on roles, where you're having, okay, this guild is for doing
Identities,
this.
purposes,
This guild is for doing
relationships.
that. Any guild, no matter what you're popping up, whether it's for like a state high level purpose or a personal type of thing, it's gonna
Reflect this structure.
It comes because you're not screwing this up.
Yeah.
The natural guild DNA is what allows other things to emerge.
So these set of constraints leave these as the building blocks which you get to play with.
Right.
And if you'll notice, they're still quite permissive.
Mm-hmm.
So constraints is really a matter of sustaining abundance, right? The purpose of constraints is so that the abundance that already arrives from nature remains. It's a conservative aspect of the model. The liberal aspect of the model is, okay, well, those constraints give us abundance. What do we do with said abundance? Because the constraints are not meant to quell choice.
It can still go many ways. Of course.
Yeah, the kind of constraints that we're discussing is basically when you do an activity, try to make sure it doesn't kill you, which is, the necessary constraint for doing activities in the first place.
Right.
If you're dead, you can't do it.
And so within education and immunity here and all that, we've already established
That's where we're heading.
there are things that need to be taken care of by these structures which are doing things more actively.
So that they can do it.
More explicitly, actively.
Yeah. And with that.
Yes. Thinking the same. We'll be right back. And bravissimo. Yeah, so this ethical and real. This is both ethical and real.
Yeah.
What we're talking about here.
Or rather, it's a way to avoid the entire spectrum of those questions. There is no questions of ethics. There is no questions of reality. This model is not detailing anything pertaining to either category, and so it doesn't dance around
It's kind
any
of
of
like
the philosophy. Or
whatever you think about thing exist or not exist is aside from the fact that this is how you can model it.
Sorry.
I think is what you're getting at.
It's not saying that those questions don't exist, but the way it's modeled, ultimately, is that those questions are strictly bound to the ontological matrix, and in the ontological matrix, you then have the subjectivity spectrum.
So if you want the true answer to ethics or reality,
Stupidity
then
spectrum.
you look into these types of models.
Yeah, but the problem would be is that they're all stupid.
Who? The model?
And the models,
all of us.
the models that
We're all stupid. That's the problem.
the models that deal with reality and ethics are all in the spectrum of stupidity. And to drive the point even more home about my personal opinions, as the spectrum of stupidity translates to idiocy, and idiocy is the choice to engage in stupidity, specifically after knowing it is in the stupid category.
I don't know, I don't know if I liked that.
I know you don't. Nobody's
like we tried to talk a little bit about it. We never got into it. That's the thing.
So nobody's gonna like it. Nobody's gonna like it. But here's the real.
No, in terms of terms, I didn't think the term was well termed.
Fine. I call idiocy is the face of recognition of something is in the spectrum of stupidity, aka engaging into it would be stupid.
I agree to make this
and
distinction.
Idiocy is an idiocy would be
to know
the
and still
decision
do
to do it.
But this is already a word in common parlance or whatever.
Yeah.
Common culture. There's a word for that. There's ignorance, which is like you don't
know.
No,
ignorance is
in terms of common what people call ignorance. This is they just didn't know. And then...
But this is sans ignorance.
There's something different from ignorance in the common understanding of the word ignorance, is that they did know, in their head they modeled it, already mapped the problem, but they're still doing what they used to do before.
So idiot.
And that's called... So no longer ignorant, definitely idiot. I like the word idiot due to ideology, ideologue, idea.
Mm-hmm.
So you're essentially saying that you're captivated by the idea, if you will.
It's like a moth going to a flame.
Yeah. So.
Except the moth is more ignorant than that.
So plain ignorance can go two ways. When that person realizes that. But then, and this comes up to which matrix are you hooked up into? One that has a complete non-obfuscated meta-narrative in which you see, wow, I should take care of everything around me. Duh.
Right, okay.
And then the other matrix is like, this is easier for me. Now I know that that's a problem and people have told me, but I keep doing it because I've managed to like have some idea that...
Neurosis, yeah.
That I should do this.
And
you can't just tell, oh, did you know that you were doing this? Yeah, mind your own business.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, oh, okay, nice matrix there, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
What else? What do? You don't do anything about that in the moment.
Yeah.
They go their way, you go yours. It's up to their family and friends to, because they're the people who will see them again. And shame on their family and friends for letting someone like that walk around. But it's common. It's common. It's common.
Well, yeah, it's perpetual is what it is.
Just funny comments. So idiots. I like the word, so idiot. Stupid idiot.
Yeah, stupid idiot is very specific.
So then stupidity, but we are all kind of beholden to stupidity to some regard in that we have to hold models, which are always wrong.
Let's bring this back a little.
So this is to make the distinction. The idiot is on top of that, in which.
Mm-hmm. So let's bring back a little bit and
there's that neuro
and de-insult our audience and basically point out that you have two idiots.
Being stupid is good.
You have two idiots sitting in front of you talking about what being an idiot is.
It's good to be stupid because it actually saves energy. It's a naturally selected for trait that neural networks should come into
in
rest.
The context of the system. It does not save energy in the context of nature. That's a key issue.
But a system comes and goes. Changes from one moment
for
to
most
the next.
people, the system,
so you can't say that the system.
For most people that are plugged into the system, like in the Matrix, they live and die in it.
But I mean, you can never say that system is real just because you're a part of it. It comes and goes. Whatever you thought it was is different the next moment, right? So that's part of the fundamental problem, the uncertainty of it all, the shifting nature of anything you try to hold on to.
That's the non-ignorant part, but the ignorant part will hold on to the ideologies.
So, but we are always, everything we do, we're always stupid.
Yeah, so
in some way or another.
Again, to bring it all back, you got two idiots talking about what being an idiot is. So we experience the same actual idiocy that we're discussing.
We want to put on top of that.
We're not talking about you being an idiot. We're talking about us being the idiots.
So the idiocy being in things like, well, yes, I know, like, I don't even know that's tough, but like, drinking or having... Well, yeah, like... for example, am I setting a really good example here?
No, we're not.
Like,
and that's part of the appeal.
And like part of, I mean, like for us, like
we're not.
I want it to be more of a good time or anything like that, right? But live streaming and YouTube and kids could be watching and people get different ideas. Even like it's hard for someone to quit drinking if they're watching somebody drinking. True. Right. That's
true.
That's like that's one of those things that we're idiots for knowing that and yet still doing it.
Yeah. Like.
Right? So idiocy, there's got to be something, and I think we're talking about degrees of hostility here, but there's probably the callousness even on top of that. Is that yet the level of callousness?
Well, yeah. The point really is that we are so severely affected by the stuff we're talking about that the people talking about it right now in front of this camera are fucking neck deep in the same mud. In the same shit pile that we're trying. Like the only reason we're talking about the shit pile is like we stuck our heads out a little bit and we smelt it. It's not that because we got out of the shit pile and telling everybody else that they're still in it. No, we are still definitely in it, and it's just that our nostrils are a little bit looser.
So is this where we pull in like the psychotic? Like I'm trying to wonder like the next level. Like let's say we're stupid, we're idiots, but we're trying not to be.
The psychosis that we're talking about and the
like spectrum neurosis, of stupidity, psychosis, neurosis. That's under the spectrum of stupidity, right?
It's sitting there in the affect part. It's the latching on to the narrative side of the affect chart. So neurosis is the latching onto the narrative, and psychosis is being in that narrative and taking that for reality. So it's part of the spectrum. And yes, it's more like
so neurosis is more of an affective type of thing, and
it's the underlying
psychosis
aspect
more
of
it, a problem of the dream and moment
of taking the dream for reality itself.
Right.
Rather,
psychosis is kind of a more deeper thing, actually, of what reality is itself.
Because it's
and neurosis, in our definition, neurosis is more linked to this typical ego affect, as in pain and pleasure, latching on through narrative of
so
hating and loving things based on what you think is coming
which are
back.
heavily dependent on the psychosis.
And so feelings in this way is actually a laundering mechanism, the same as money is in our economy.
Yeah.
It's like, okay,
reward, transaction up
and we
down,
call it
yeah.
reward and punishment.
Mm-hmm.
These are two currencies that are given. A whip is literally a punishment, right? And to in all of the different ways that we are whipped, right? With these narratives, this is our neurosis that we're calling.
Well, this is what allows us to say that the real picture of what a commodity is, the thing that keeps coming back and driving the psychosis and neurosis together, is a sadomasochistic trinket. It's a trinket that dishes out rewards and punishments all at the same time by being plugged into the ongoing narrative and reiterated through the psychosis.
Right, and your mind kind of processes that
And
automatically with that trinket as part of this.
And so the latching on that
this is like a lever and button of the ego being an agent of the market.
And so the latching on in the neurosis component of this is to that trinket. You're seeking the sadomasochistic trinket over and over and over and over and over and over and over again.
It's whether not matter you're after the pleasure or avoiding the pain, the object itself is what's accepted. This is like an opposame where like someone who hates it loves it or loves it is not different than...
It's what you're trying to do, and that's where you're exploited, because the only thing that you're affecting is the psychotic narrative, is the psychosis itself, so that, which is beside the point, and you're still getting the rewards and punishment outflowing from the extrinsic narrative, but you're latching on to whatever else could reward you better and avoid the punishment over. So you do that for the narrative. The narrative comes back with something totally different, and you do it again, and you do it again.
So commodities are like these smallest chunk of functionality, almost like an entity or whatever, or an object, a type of object. That slots and fits, and you can I mean in the sense of the market, you're able to quickly replace one thing for another, one drug for another, or one this
in
or
and
that.
of itself, it's the meaningless trinket that you plug into some other context that you don't have true access to except through those trinkets.
Right.
And so the trinkets you get are meaningless to you, and you exchange them for things in a system you don't really have access to. And so
this is the obfuscated meta-narrative feeling to it.
Yeah.
You don't really know why you're doing this for company X. Well, essentially, we are capitalists in selling our labor, in saying, I'll work if you pay me money. That makes me a commodity, a piece of capital. My mind just turned my body. My mind turned my body into a piece of capital. I have now participated, just as Jeff Bezos, just as Musk, just as anyone else, in this power game by dominating first my own body, right? And we all play it. That's how we are all capitalists. This is a worldwide thing. Nobody practically, out of principle, exits the system. You can do it. If most of us tried it, we would die.
There was nowhere to go.
And right, but this is the like chicken and egg type of thing now for the guild. Like, where does it come? So we're talking about this membrane idea and like creating organization and helping people to organize and think about their relationships in terms of the guild.
That is a question of
something fundamentally different. What is different than capitalizing my own body? The guild. That's what we're saying.
The guild is the repetition of what precedes capital.
Capitalism emerged out of it, we're saying. Capital emerged out of this.
Yeah.
And this is the machine of the ego.
Proceeds but by representation.
According to the book, the machine of the ego emerging out of the machine of the self, which is a more natural
and to
plateau, if you will.
to reinstall the machine of the self through medicine on top of the ego.
Right, and then medicine on top of that. This is what we're proposing as the medicine on top of it.
So the original picture is simpler. The actual picture is got this layer of gunk to sift through on top of representation and move on from there. So we have an obfuscation layer that we're sitting on top of. And we cannot, and yeah, like you're saying, the broader picture here is not that we can't escape capitalism. Is more to the point that we cannot pretend that the obfuscation layer is not there. The entire point of having the trade guild is to make
Right.
that point explicit.
That's great. That's to recognize the soul, the zeitgeist,
In
I
the
think.
explicit form. The trade guild is
The
probably
obfuscated meta-narrative. That's what we
the
call it.
trade guild is probably the only face that is ripe for targeting for the guild in terms of the system targeting the guild. It's at that junction point. So the trade guild is probably the most sophisticated self-organized element.
You mean when you're
From here.
interfacing with the market
Yeah.
specifically? Like trade,
Because-
trade implies other units
Because the market
of self,
The-
replicants, if you will, of self, other place.
the
other
market
ways.
doesn't do anything except weave itself into other systems, right? Like, so if you open up the gateway of the guild to the market, from the market's perspective, it's just going to try to tackle every vein and every artery within, and market, right, and commodify it and market
Right.
it just
the
like
more
it
it
does with
knows
everything
about
else.
it, yes, it will always
And
dangle
so,
the carrot.
and
or
so
the
and
bait.
so it has to be like the most sophisticated piece of articulation that we come up with, because that membrane has to be able to withstand and soak up every and all attempts that it can throw at it. It's immunity all over again, right? If you want to talk about immunity, trade is probably the next stage
Well-
in which it becomes very explicit.
This is what people think of society as, basically trade. So there's no denying this is like it's not a major part of
Well, okay.
society, right?
Okay, let me make a comment. Trade in our model has been recognized as the conversation between enemies,
Right.
not the unified body, but the body that is in competition with something else. So,
Enemies as opposed to self-same neighbors, if you will.
Mhm.
Enemies vs neighbors. In the most generous reading of the term.
right. So, right off the bat, it's already placing the existent system as a hostile environment in which immunity is, it's fundamental. It's like you don't have any other recourse except for essentially the immunity guild has focus in it, right, to start off with, but it ends off with preservation and restoration. The trade guild is probably what you would call the pinnacle example of what deals with preservation of the lower guilds and
Right.
restoration whenever they're damaged.
Immunity has such huge implications. According to like holonic stacking theory, whatever we're calling that, any layer needs to represent all the other layers, right? So including in the layer of our thinking, in our heads, we need to have the complexity of all of the to model something plausible of these stacks using this type of stacking. There's any other way that we've been doing thinking about society, civilization, has been disconnected in our heads. This kind of hierarchical thinking of this is how to do organization. It's all working like this. No, it isn't. That's about to collapse inevitably. This is what's actually happening underneath.
It's not about to collapse. It collapses all the time. It's
Right.
it's a numbers.
Yeah,
It's more of a numbers
and it feels
game.
bad all the time. This is again the
It's
soul.
more of a numbers game. We are shielded from the effect of it because there's just that many more still remaining
Right.
entities, but they're
Yeah,
always
which is
collapsing.
sad because it's like a
It's always a death sentence.
prison, if you will. This is where all the black iron prison metaphors come from, as a way to say a creepy name. Not that that's but yeah, this is like the dystopian type shit. it comes from that, because we're completely ignoring who we are, where we are, what we are.
We're ignoring what sustains consolidation itself. The mechanism behind negative entropy, the mechanism behind nature building itself up.
We don't know where we
are
are.
ignoring it.
The problem is we don't know where we are in space.
Interestingly enough, these stacks are actually meant for orienting ourselves in that space as well. We are education, we are immunity, we are environment, we are technology. Those are self-reflective things. That's a honing in mechanism to give ourselves context. We are in the middle of an uncertainty. We are in the middle of entropy. We are in the middle of space-time, matter, life, death, animals, humans, machines, fiat, corporations, and states. We're in the midst of all of that. That is our context.
Right.
We're in the context of order. We're in the context of chaos. We're in the context of the absurd. We're in the context of time, context of space itself, in the context of consolidation of some form, decay of another form. Decay and consolidation all happen at the same time as a fuel burns through to feed another negative entropic system. These are all the grounding context in which we already find ourselves in. We don't need to really question, not because of some abstract theory, but because those are places in which we find ourselves to begin with and already have extraordinarily descriptive capacity for, to the point of where we have mathematics for space and time, mathematics for decay and consolidation, mathematics describing things of order in juxtaposition of things indescribable in disorder or chaos. We have all of these things to begin with, and that is, and it's from the context of what we already have that we ground ourselves in.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need an underlying theoretical juxtaposition to move off of the platform in which we already find ourselves in.
It's very weird.
Because it's a mental masturbation game.
It's very weird that we created these models, literally. Like, out of, like, yes, material and things we saw here and there, but we constructed these models. That's very different from giving somebody a model, like just copying this or that, right? This is a totally different process. Who that is? Is it Dustman?
Hey, buddy!
Dustman, back for another live stream.
How's it going?
Heck yeah, buddy. How's the clan?
I'll be right back then.
Planning
Kicking some boss ass.
as we speak.
Yo, you can go around that way too. It's fine.
I'm lazy.
All right. Show our guests some respect.
Jeez. I'm already intruding.
No, it's all good. But yeah, we are still recording. We're still streaming. It's been a chill. There's actually, I don't think anybody watched yet. Let me check. I don't think so. No, 0. It's
damn.
actually very rare to be 0. But we started, because we started at 10 today, really early. I drove up from Mississauga, so.
Oh, damn.
Yep.
Got to get on Twitch.
Well, yeah. Actually, yeah, I could. I know the scene. It's possible. It's not really about that.
Exposure.
It's more about the record. So YouTube, Google is kind of more like a record keeper.
Right.
It's just about recording.
Oh, I thought you were
But
about the live stream.
If we are. We're live streaming to YouTube, right? Which is like, sometimes you catch some randos, but, you know.
True.
It's more that it's a Google service, and it's more standard Twitch. Who knows? I mean, they've been around for a long time, but
I don't know. Yeah, it's all you hear about is
it's.
check us out on Twitch. We're doing a live stream.
If I want to start getting followers,
I think you can monetize it a bit better too.
If I want followers and to do all that, no, we're not ready. But yes, someday soon, maybe next year. But yeah, like, we're in the consolidation phase right now with this book project.
Wow.
Trying to get everything together. We're just talking today about organizational structures of society, basically, right? Like, you know how businesses and corporations kind of try to optimize their workflow with like agile. I don't know if you've heard of agile or like lean company processes. It's like how to keep evolving very quickly your company. Hold on. So like we've been trying to going from that perspective to the social perspective that we should be taking all these technologies and like ways that people are organizing in their company and even better, but gear this towards society, right? Like that anybody can learn how to make a better organization if you want to get together with your neighbors and like make something happen.
So whatever. Organization doesn't have to be like an actual corporation.
Giving
it can
tools,
be just a group.
Tools for that, for like this emergence and disemergence of organization to just rise and fall kind of thing. Like not get all corrupted and sticking around for too long.
For one of the things,
anyways, I got to take a break myself.
We're a bit sticklers for, say, things with permanency. The way we look at corporations, right, is like, how long does it survive? And if it's surviving, it's viable. If it's not, it's not, right?
Right.
But it doesn't answer the question of like what's necessary at the time, because some things don't need to exist all the time.
Right.
Right, and we don't answer those kinds of questions. And what do corporations do when they don't need to exist? They manufacture the demand for themselves, right? That ain't right. So it's
they're just trying to stay relevant,
right? But on the premise that we're saying isn't quite correct. Like you can be relevant, but you don't necessarily need to be doing the exact same thing all the time.
True. Right? Yeah, you need to evolve based on the
business
demands, I guess.
isn't set up that way. I mean, look at this shop. To do something else, the equipment that you have would be impossible to replace, right? Like it's an undertaking that's like you're stuck.
Right.
So on the one hand side, you're stuck having to do this. On the other hand side, it ain't right that we have to continue to do things that don't necessarily need to be doing.
Right.
So there's that dilemma. And
when did you change your directive?
Yeah, it's one of the problems with having like high-end machinery is that it's extremely narrow focus.
Yeah. Try to be specialized, right?
But life isn't like that though. In fact, human beings themselves are more of the most general type of species there is out there. That our body plan is basically sucks at everything equally. But our mind compensates for everything in a completely overwhelming way. So there's the give and take. We also eat everything. We also live everywhere. We're general species, right?
Yeah.
And so to force a general species into specialization seems kind of at odds with the natural order of things, if you will.
Oh. But going back to like the jack of all trades kind of idea, where it's like, okay, you can be good at everything, but not really good at anything.
In the
you know what I mean?
In the ideal scenario,
yeah, exactly.
In the ideal scenario, though, if you have many people who are jacks of all trades, they'll start to take on the specialities of where they are more competent, just in the groove of things. But if, say, somebody's unavailable or sick, you can have that kind of flexibility of where. So there's a level at which being a jack of all trades is actually quite beneficial. It just can't be extremely, extremely high tech.
Well, you should be both. Right. You should have some specialties and some.
Well, which is the case for
responsibilities of like knowing what's going on.
Yeah, like some basic knowledge on everything.
Yeah. But you know, like
if you can.
I love using this example for the first time. You can't be so specialized that you can't wipe your own ass, which is what happens to people who are rich, for example.
Right.
Yeah, you just press a button.
No, they got people for it.
It's
it's a button.
It's a bidet.
No, it's literally a button, Genya.
For some people, it's a button. For others, it's an actual person.
They're part of like a sex cult.
No, man. There's like medieval documents talking about ass wipers for kings and
For
shit.
the king, okay.
Right, yeah.
Like it's a thing.
Okay. In the extreme. I guess we've never encountered that on Earth.
Yes, it's very much outside of my living experience.
You know, there's like, what, 220 whatever countries? I'm sure some of them have like literal king ass wipers to this day.
North Korea.
Guaranteed. No, forget about the ones we know about. There are literally
the ass blow dryer.
There are
That's awesome.
they have very big lung capacity. It's selected.
Well, you'd
They're
have
very
to.
specialized. They're specialized.
And they
in
come from the
blowing.
mountains where you need specialized lungs to breathe.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like kind of as an example, like raising kids, right? The more stuff you do for them, the more dependent they become, and
Oh yeah, like
right?
why
Like,
rich kids have so many problems, for example. Yeah.
right? Because they become basically just reliant on
Right.
everybody else. They can't do anything for themselves,
And that's not their fault.
They've never had to.
That's
it's not really their
education.
fault.
right?
It's just, and you know what? It is a struggle as a parent, because almost all the time you can foresee consequences, and you're trying to like, okay, well,
And you can't do anything about it to teach them.
well, you can. The thing is that if you do, they don't learn.
So they need to learn on their own.
So you have to quench your own impulse to do it. And
Right, because down the road they'll be like, I've been following what Daddy said. Is it really true? that'll be haunting.
now-
That's like the Christian teenager
And now it's
syndrome.
getting worse.
Yeah.
And now it's getting worse because outside of that, there is the external judgment of people thinking exactly like that too, who would tell you you have to do all of those things, and if you don't, you're terrible.
Right.
Right? So you can't even take the time to give your kids the hard lessons because all of a sudden somebody's fucking calling CPA.
Right.
I never actually had an experience that extreme, but I can definitely imagine how it can go that way.
Yeah. Well, there's going to be other parents placing judgments on you based off of what they see you doing.
So yeah, so it's not even like
like
quenching your own need to keep them safe. You're also managing other idiots.
Yeah, like societal kind of pressures and expectations.
And not even societal, like you can have a neighbor who's just too nosy and too too helicoptery
Right.
from your own perspective, like things you wouldn't even think of that people are paying attention to,
Yeah.
and they would like stir up a fucking stink, getting into your business.
Righteousness.
They want to act like your parents.
Yeah, exactly. You're my dad now.
Thankfully, I've been blessed to not have too much interference, and all our issues are medically recorded, so... Well, my sons might be on the spectrum kind of thing.
Okay.
If he is, he's like on a very high functioning side, not to be confused with
Cohen?
Lincoln.
You got like Asperger's.
You'd almost wonder either.
You know why? Like if it is,
Well, he's got
it's-
like the whole ADD thing going.
he's got
like,
the ADD thing going.
Just zoop,
But
zoop
the thing
here,
is
there.
that if he is, I am probably too.
I haven't
because
known
a
him
lot
well
of his
enough.
traits are mine.
well enough to think even that like.
So if he is on the spectrum, chances are I am as well.
What?
So my isms are,
Well, we all-
probably from that.
Yeah, we can't project that on
We're
you.
we're
I
kind
can't.
of we're
I
kind
can't,
of
but I
in.
scored
Or just make assumptions.
I did a self-assessment and I scored rather high. It's funny
That's
because
bullshit, man.
no, I scored high on how it like my drives, but I scored low on masking, so I don't hide it either.
Yeah.
So I'm
It's usually like a lower like
so the
emotional
chances are
intelligence, right?
so the chances are that I am
Well, if
it's high.
if you think in terms of like how well do you usually integrate with average people, or is there conflict?
I
like
don't
something
integrate.
for this guy.
I don't.
Definitely, like he just is who he is and won't bow to like what you expect some people to be.
Right.
Right? It doesn't matter what you expect. This is what you get. So, but and I think if we were all like that, we would all conflict with each other. Like there would be conflict, right? It wouldn't all be like harmony and all this.
There's a limit to how far I'll go. Like I can recognize situations. The thing is that I think what describes me most accurately is that I'm emotionally on a different track. I do understand emotions. I totally relate to them and everything, but I experience them on a different time scale. You know, like when things are bad, I don't react. Like I don't. But then I can go into a corner and break down.
Right.
So it's so people don't see that the second part.
That can be a skill too.
Yeah, people don't. But it's not a skill. It's just something that happens to me mostly.
So you're not processing the emotions.
I'm processing, but in the back. It's like it's in the back burner.
I don't know. I find I have an ability to kind of like mask, if you will. Is that called masking or whatever?
Yeah, I don't mask.
Like you kind of, I don't know, just not get like for most things, I think it's better if you're calm in a situation.
Oh, 100%.
So like I'm just like that's how like I know that that's a better thing to do anyways, right?
I do mask, but only when it comes down to performance and I'm expected to perform. So like an interview or like going into a meeting or any of those things, I kind of have like, okay, you gotta do this role, gotta play that role kind of thing.
Yeah, typically it's like low emotional intelligence and like lack of empathy, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
The psychopath thing, not
it's not really necessarily like that. They do have that in common as well.
You can have that vibe from me only
like
because
of overlay, right?
There's a overlay with being off track. The difference is that their track doesn't process it later at all, whereas I would sit there and be like, okay, well, I probably didn't handle the situation a certain way, and what was the matter with that reaction? Where did that come from? Like I do internalize
to learn from it.
Yeah, I do that too. Like at night, it kind of keeps me up too. It's just like you like replay situations.
It's the offbeat emotionality that really trips people up because you'd expect a certain reaction and you wouldn't get it from me, right? I would just maybe stare at you for a bit longer.
Sure.
Like waiting for the next bit of information to like know what the fuck you're talking about or what you're expecting. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think
because in my head, it's like I have an option of going a million different ways. Which is the correct way here?
Right, and you try to leave things open. And so when you react emotionally, you're kind of committing to certain narratives.
And then I get passionate about what I'm talking about.
It's hard to go back after you've already overreacted or
Yeah, exactly.
blown something up out of proportion.
Especially with the women.
Yeah.
These are skills.
Yeah, well, they feed more on emotional stuff. We're more on logical things, right?
No, it's just it's the partner that's usually right in front of you. Who else is going to get the blunt of everything you have?
Oh, you quit smoking, eh?
Yeah.
So you got your vape going?
Oh, yeah, it's been...
Have you actually been cutting down nicotine content over days?
Oh, this might even have more nicotine in it. I don't even know.
Well, that's the thing. You could have just upgraded. Like you said, you're quitting
super nicotine
smoking.
I don't know if I trust those vapors.
Before you know, your lung collapses.
Yeah, apparently there's like it's the oils that they use with the liquids. They coat the lung or something like that. It's
yeah, it's definitely not healthy.
Apparently different than tar.
Apparently, weed is basically the only thing that's safe to vape, from what I understand.
I don't know. Even that has.
Never heard about it,
but I've vaped like weed. Monoglycides or something like that.
Weed is usually with water. Even when you vape.
What?
No, it's not water.
No,
it's
like oil. It's just like honey
some
oil.
Some kind of coconut oil or some
I can be wrong.
Things.
Think so? Well, yeah, as a base. Would you even need a base though? Like, isn't oil? It's hemp oil base. why not?
Yeah, I was
oil-based
thinking.
I don't know. There's some other stuff in there too.
Yeah, there
I'm
always
not
is.
an expert, though. I have no idea on the exact ingredients. But
So I finally had the Rona.
you sound like you still got it.
It's like tail end congestion.
He's been
It's been 3 weeks, so there's
Yeah,
no way.
Wally.
There's no way I'm
That's the weird part.
anything.
Got the long COVID.
No.
Well, that is a pretty long time, man.
Long as a
That
year.
only affected
long
me
as
for a
like
few days
year.
at any time.
Long as like a year.
I don't know if I've ever got it. Then again, I've never
I
really
lost my
got
sense of
tested.
smell though. Like fucking gone.
Yeah, that's common.
You
Or
want some
taste.
horse paste? I got some if you want it.
Could probably.
Ivermectin?
I could probably sense
Kill
that.
that right off. Whatever's left, just end viral replication in your body. If you want, yeah, that's if you, like at this point you would think viral replication has ended because antibodies it's all been shut down by this point, right? Surely, truly, there must not be any tissues left in your body where it's still replicating.
Like
There could be like long-term lung damage, right?
Yeah, I heard of yeah, I guess I don't know. Anyways,
That's
but
if you're like choking though.
there are worse things out there.
So yeah, I can't smell shit literally and figuratively. You know how they were doing fertilizing recently?
How do you know?
My son was
Probably
like, it
pig
smells. My son's like, it smells like shit.
Like one of those
and I'm like,
pig shit.
I don't smell fuck all.
That sucks. So then your taste is probably off too.
Taste is a little off, but it's okay. Like
Yeah.
it's not drastic.
Because usually the two are kind of related, right?
Yeah. No, it's just my nose. And no congestion either. It was like it just fucked with my cells, but it didn't do any of the snot thing.
Well, you sound congested though.
It's lungs right now. Lungs, throat. It's mostly the phlegm that's the remainder of.
Yeah.
Because
You just need to break up the
when-
mucus in your lungs then?
I think it's
Pardon
just getting rid of the actual
me.
damage because
Or
it
that too,
kills the cells, right? Apparently, smoking has helpful utility.
That was one of the first things I
Okay.
heard of.
Yeah, the
Literally,
break up the
like
phlegm.
within a
It-
day or two of the pandemic starting back.
smoking compromises the
heard
ability
of it in
the
January-
virus to infect
January
the
of 19,
cells
I believe.
in the lungs.
Ah, okay.
There's like interference.
Well,
yes.
it's a ACE2 receptor. It binds to, and nicotine. Smoking it can reduce the amount of those that are present on your alveoli or whatever shit on your lungs.
Okay.
The receptor itself reduces in number, therefore binding sites for the virus is less.
reduced. Yeah.
Maybe that's why
From
I didn't
smoking.
get it. Maybe that's why I didn't get it. Shit, I gotta get back on the swing.
Yeah, get back on it. What are you doing, man?
Shit. I'm compromising myself.
No, actually, that nicotine, that's what it is. That does it, so same thing.
You're good.
You're
Ending either
okay.
way, so maybe I am doing better. Yeah, I can't really do any bigger dabs or anything, so hard to say.
Dabbing nicotine?
No, like dabbing extracts, high THC extracts.
Yeah, I never heard of THC affecting it at all.
I'm sure it probably benefits.
It's all about
benefits
salvia,
you.
man. Gotta smoke the
Tough to
salvia.
say. Tough to say.
Salvia.
It's been a while.
Can you even get it anywhere? Probably in, like the dark web.
It was fucking available in stores before.
Well, I know that, but I mean, I have a feeling the laws were changed probably around that. Maybe
For
not.
salvia? No, it's around.
It's,
Never
You
heard
can
of
still
it.
get
legal?
your 12x, your 24x.
It's still legal? Well, because remember there was
far
like
as I
that
know,
big
yeah.
trend on YouTube of people making fucking salvia videos where they're just like freaking out, and then there
Never
was, like,
watch
court cases.
porn on it. Never, ever watch porn on it.
Why would you do that?
Yeah, it
I
sounds
don't know.
weird.
I was in my 20s. It was a long time ago.
Cock out, hitting the salvia. All right, let's see where this goes.
Wow.
It's a very different experience of doggy style. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine.
Don't.
That's like I don't know. Every trip is different though on that shit. So
Yeah.
all
Well,
dependent on your environment
it was potent extract, so it was like it immediately like shifted
Oh, yeah,
into
no, that's what it does.
multiple frames of reference at the same time.
Oh yeah.
That's what I'm saying. You don't want to. Yeah, like it took over it took over the entire visual field.
Oh yeah. I've had trips last for like almost an hour on that shit.
Really?
Yeah. I
No
smoked
way.
a
I've
big,
never
yeah.
had like more than a few minutes.
No, it's usually about like 10, 15 minutes kind of thing. But I was up all night, you know, doing a bunch of different drugs. And then I hit a zong of it, like a big bowl, with a torch. So with a torch, apparently, yeah, like
well, the
a
torch
higher,
does it.
yeah,
Right,
it
it's supposed to use a
unlocks even
torch.
more, apparently.
Well, yeah, you're
So-
burning the real fuck out of it.
Yeah. Well, no, it's something to do with
No,
like,
don't
the
not.
higher,
It
the
should be a
higher
torch.
temperature.
That's you have to use
Well, yeah,
a torch.
you're extracting the real chemicals out of there.
Yeah.
Whatever
opposed
the
to just burning
explanation.
Yeah, there's something to do with
It's a
it.
bigger
They release-
molecule.
I've come to
or
the
whatever.
conclusion that most of civilization is actually a trend of sitting around a fire and burning the living shit out of something to chemically
Out of stuff, lots of
to
stuff.
chemically create something new. And I came to this
Yeah, fire is
conclusion
a
like,
big
what-
is a big thing.
By
Fire
what?
is a plateau.
by watching people like do primitive shit.
Yeah.
Like from like nothing,
Yeah.
create like cement and all of those things.
They just
From
had
ash.
that
Yeah.
knowledge in there. They just
So
didn't
yeah,
know they
like
had it.
cement, for example, how you make cement is you sit there for like 8 hours straight burning wood to the point of which like you got white ash.
Okay.
Collect all of that, mix it in with water. It creates these hard pellets you can't even crush. You then run that through a furnace again, and you burn the living fuck out of it, which actually chemically changes it and like reintroduces oxygen into the chemistry of the ash,
Okay.
and then it creates a different substance. Now, when you mix that with water after you
Potash.
it's going to be brittle. Before it was hard, right? Like you couldn't break it. After you burn it, it's brittle. You mix that powder with water now. You touch that shit, it will burn your hands. It's cement.
Potassium
It's like it's
Science.
so.
plus water.
Take that picture and extrapolate. Like literally everything that we've created has to do with somebody sitting at a furnace, burning the living fuck out of it
Yeah.
with airflow. Like this is an emotion because of how they do air.
Right.
They use a fan. They put a fan inside like a
Bellows or something.
like a small ceramic thing. Put a stick up,
Yeah.
put a rope, and another stick, and just move that stick back and forth, and it just blows air into the furnace.
Right.
So 8 hours of that and a day,
Yeah.
like just
Yeah, that's a lot. So what about building a city? And where is the delineation between like a plateau of the initial civilization? How did we create
well.
civilization?
First of all, you need the time to sit there, right? So that means other people feeding you. That means people taking over.
well, you can
the
do that in a
work.
tribe.
Exactly.
This isn't a big like sure this is a big technology, but it's not necessarily what made the city state possible.
I don't know.
Right.
I think like
As opposed to
hallucinogenics,
tribe.
It's certainly
mushrooms-
part of it.
Mushrooms.
Sure.
It's the idea that
But
the
what
wall, we
is-
already had the
What
wall
I'm
builder.
saying, what is the thing that actually changed that made the city state over the tribe?
The time frame that's allowable for sitting out from the living experience itself.
So
the
specialization?
the ability to sit there for 8 hours
Did we
straight,
ever
day
formulate
in,
that?
day out,
Did we formulate
and somebody
this?
else feeding you.
Because I don't think we did.
Well, have you ever
Kinda
have
tried.
you ever done salvia with a bunch of people?
No.
Okay, so anytime I've ever done salvia with a bunch of people, everybody ends up walking in a circle. And then you come to the realization that everybody has their own role in society. Everybody's
I've
their
never
own
heard about that. That's pretty
autonomous
neat,
kind of
though.
person, but they're all walking in a circle.
Switching those roles,
Maybe a
depending
little
on the
bit, but-
circumstance.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like you have to.
It's like
that-
the most
that idea-
basic pattern, but that's interesting that people would all together find a collective pattern and just start doing it socially.
Well,
Yeah.
that's
Like-
the idea behind being able to specialize as well. Is that you've created a time frame in which you can not go hunting, and if you have that delay,
That's
in-
always
in-
been
in-
part
in-
of the
in-
tribe.
Right, but like the more time you supply to these extrinsic activities of creating these extra materials, the less
So the tribe
less
allowed-
generalized.
What
the
you're
tribe
saying,
becomes.
Jenya, the tribe allowed for the technology of cement production or whatever, fire and forge.
Right. So now we have those building tools in play, and this ties into. It's not the same weed that's inside there.
The fuck? What a waste of.
I know. That's a.
I was gonna say,
Just
you
a
put
baby-
that in your pocket walker out.
Is that a
Exactly.
weed case, or are you happy to see
That's
me?
the running joke.
Jesus.
Inside and outside the house.
Bigfoot's dick right there.
It ties
Emasculated.
into an earlier point in a few meetings back where you were talking about how the wall builder is already there, right? Like, we didn't get to a walled city in the flash. It was it was a
no.
gradual buildup. So we're seeing what I'm
No.
talking about is seeing the introduction of time into the space so that you can create all of these extra things, and then now
Yeah,
after a
that
while
has
when
to
you
be
have
there, I
all of these
get
extra
that.
things generations farther out, when you have all of these extra things, building a wall around whatever it is, you already have everything there.
Yeah.
It's just another. That's when it becomes.
No.
There's a buildup, and then there's a switch.
Then you can have
That's
the
a
switch.
threshold.
But what is the switch? That's what I'm asking.
Agriculture.
And no, it's the ability to take something as an obfuscated meta narrative and to accept the obfuscated meta narrative. What allows that? That is
Another buildup.
when you can participate in society using a currency, so you don't even know what the rest of anybody's doing. You just get paid.
Yeah, your
Okay.
labor.
You do this and you get
your work,
paid.
Everything is
Which
That
your
is the
contribution.
major shift point to this is where civilization comes
And what
from.
I'm
So you've had all this
about-
time, great. This is the shift. Now you can do a
Yeah.
city state.
This is the same
But
part.
there has to be
it's the
like
same
somebody
part
with
of
a
that
vision,
snap.
though, too, right?
It's the same part of that.
it has to
snap.
emerge somehow, yes. But then you have a currency. You've
Right.
got
So you build up gradually to having a currency. After
So a
all the
currency,
gradual
that's-
build up, you have currency, and then all of a sudden you have a sudden shift, which seems sudden
In
because
which-
it doesn't attribute the build up.
because people have probably already been as soon as you start using something like currency is
Right.
a laundering layer, a layer of meaning that launders. It gives a number to everything, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't
Like
mean
you
you
don't
know
butcher
about
your-
Quantifies your-
you don't
your
know
work,
anything about
basically.
this or that. You just pay the
You
price.
just go to your butcher to get your meat. You don't hunt your meat. You go to your
So
butcher.
the
There's a
introduction
removal
of
the
of-
monetary.
There's
Dude,
a removal.
Do you see what we're doing here, Jenya? That
You're
currency,
saying
a
the same
layer
thing,
of
though.
currency. This is the mind has to accept such a thing.
So
The
yes,
obfuscated
it's
meta
the sa-
narrative.
it's the
This is
same
what allows
picture.
you into the walled city
Right.
to
It's-
trade, to become capital,
Your,
to say
trading your
it's the same-
skills.
it's the
for
trading your body.
what
It's
you
the
need.
same picture
right?
from a different
Selling
angle.
yourself.
It's the same picture from a different angle. I was talking about the buildup that allows for what you're talking about to actually happen. So the buildup in the buildup, it's just a normal course of things. People get more specialized
Yeah, it feels
because more
very
time
natural.
is available. So you get more specialized. So more time is available.
It's
you
a
get
good
more
story.
special.
It sounds plausible.
Now you're generations away from where it started.
You
So
forget
all
where
of-
it came from.
so
All the time we forget.
All the stories are oral. All the stories are about now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it from that point on, it seems like a fundamental shift, but there is that buildup preceding it.
That's why they say you're
And I'm
standing on the
saying-
shoulders of giants, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so yes, by the time you're talking about you're already laundered, you're already going through currency, you're already building things outside of the normal living
the
situation.
laundry of meaning.
But you've been doing this for generation,
Yeah.
and so naturally, what you would do now is going to pertain to the context now, not
and,
then.
And this all came from
So
stupidity.
it's the same thing.
This all came from stupidity, model speak, in that it's actually saves you energy to be stupid. when you shortcut ideas. And
Or just not-
we need to qualify stupidity.
Not
You're like-
thinking and then taking orders.
you're like,
blindly,
okay,
right?
this way works. I'll keep doing that. That saves energy.
Right.
It works in the moment, in the time, but things change, and that's a problem.
Right.
Right. Your models need to be updated.
Right, but I guess at the same time, you know, there's reason why traditions have stood the test of time for thousands of years. Right? Because if you stray too far from that, then you're just going to get into chaos one way or another.
Right. And
Potentially.
And
I mean-
I agree with that it should be expressed.
Right.
Like what are you conserving? Right? It needs to be known, that way we can know it and maybe think about it better, right?
Right.
Logic, rationalize about it, the model better. If we have a full model, a lot of like religions and cults and stuff will be conservative, whatever, but they don't give you the model. You follow. Okay, I agree to follow, to
Right.
obey. Right? We need a model. We need something to reason on.
Right. So if you stray, I don't know, I think like if you stray too far from that model, you can get into like
Well, we know the Bible
You
has
know,
worked.
degrading,
example.
degrading the quality of, you know,
Worked for what and all this, and like you can look back and say, oh, was it better back then, or was it just, you know, I kind of have a feeling like it's been a big steamroll civilization, just kind of like when you're conserving, yes, you can kind of have the good life, but it's towards certain ends. Like
Right.
we don't know the bigger system we are participating in, really.
right.
We don't know what we're supporting. That's the laundry of meaning and all that. This is what allows this breakaway civilization. All civilization, as it's been, is a breakaway of the capitalist, I guess, slash
Underpinning process.
capitalist, and I was gonna say like the priests, if you will. Like it's kind of like state and religion is bound, and the system is all bound. It's all in one thing, kind of thing.
Priesthood is there to justify the activities of the elite in the capitalistic sense. So the people that move capital and do things need a reason to justify what these things are for. Religion supplies the mythological structure that says
Of who I am.
this is really the reason for the order of the way things are.
This is who I am, slotting into that
So
order.
older religions are more obvious about it. You have like your pharaoh being the representation of God on earth, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff. The more we get into modern times, the less
You can get
the
away
le-
with that shit.
the less archaic it
I
is,
am the
and the more.
pharaoh.
And
Well,
the
back
more,
then it wasn't really monotheism; it was multiple gods.
today,
and
that trajectory is
True.
not quite accurate. There is the multiplicity of gods never really died.
Right.
It's a story we tell in the West usually, but it's not the real story.
What, that they died?
That's a different.
That the gods died?
Polytheism died out to monotheism, and then monotheism died out to
No,
atheism.
like you've
That's
got
a very
you've got stuff
Western
like professionalism, which is where
That's
you
what I was
have
getting to.
you have your
So-
gods of certain professions.
So the priest,
Right.
the priest class in modern times is now the economist, the therapist, the psychiatrist, the people that take the narrative of modernity and insist on installing that in everybody.
right,
So the reason we do these things is because it's good for the economy. The reason we do these things is because it's good for our psyche or whatever.
Right.
And then there's all these standards upon which they're all based. And really,
yeah.
if you
There's a
think
lot of
about it,
similarities between.
if you really think about what their jobs are, they're about sifting through society and slotting them into, okay, this is a participant in the system and it can be a good cog in the wheel, or this is a problematic part of the system and we need to fix it.
Right.
Which is why no matter what your mental issues are, it's never the problem. It's not the society that created those problems in your life. It's you have to fix yourself.
Right, of course.
to fit back into society. You see, there's a shifting of blame happening. So all of these priesthood professions that used to be part of a more grander, like, archetypal narrative, the religious one, is now decimated into different institutions and slotted into marketing.
Yeah. Well,
It's the
they-
same
they made,
picture.
like,
It's the
a
same picture, different language.
money-making system.
Marketing and
out of that,
religion,
in a way, right?
psychiatry and religion, economy and religion, same shit, different pile.
Sure.
Economists, for example, make all of their predictions based on nothing.
Random models.
An
maybe.
economist is
like,
going to be
see
able
trends.
to explain. An economist is somebody who can. How does the quote go? An economist is somebody who can explain today why the things predicted yesterday aren't working tomorrow, or some shit like that. It's basically like an after the fact sort of.
Captain Hindsight.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's all like about an emergent like emotion of the mass. That's what markets how they move, right?
And if
But they
were,
can see trends though too.
You don't
right?
predict
They
that.
can-
But if they
only
were
certain
break it
people,
down.
dude. Only
If-
certain people can see trends. Insiders.
And they're not
the
even-
market is all about insiders. There's only a select few who know about this deal.
And they can-
only
they
a
can
select
also
few
steer
know
it.
about that.
And
deal.
if this,
However they
and
want
if
it.
this,
Potentially,
and if this
yes.
was a science, don't you think that maybe a couple thousand years into the project would be able to fucking figure out something?
Yeah. So
I mean,
no, we can't.
to the point where we don't have the exact same problems we had exactly thousands of years ago, like poverty.
Well, we're fucking
How?
so many times
How?
better, like 1,000 times better.
No,
now
no,
than
we're,
we were
we're
back
not.
then.
We're not
Progress.
Better. We're not
Big time.
better because the people at the bottom are at the same bottom. You don't get
Yeah, but
special
there's less of
treatment on
them.
the street.
But there's less.
Well,
of them.
so
No, there isn't.
what
Yeah,
I
it's
what
way
I
less.
hear you saying, Dustman, is like that things have gotten trending overall way better for everybody.
We have
Right.
more trinkets.
I think so for sure.
Me too. You can't. How could you deny that?
Well, you can.
But still, there's the
because
same disparity, and
It's the exact same disparity because you still have people literally sleeping on the ground.
Right.
no, they can't. They put spikes there now.
That's even better. To argue that there's less of them, it was also impossible because there's an population boom. So, strictly speaking, the quantity is actually larger.
Right. So the
But it's not
ratio
even,
though.
But it's not even
we're
about the
talking about.
ratio or the problem. It's the fact of the problem is that thousands of years later, if we had any handle on what the economy actually fucking is, don't you think that it would have solved this problem by now?
Through like
It's been
through,
over
Through
millennia.
what you mean
So
is
how do you
what you
solve
mean
the
is like
problem? I
through
don't
having
understand.
abundance flowing in. If you understood the economy, there would be abundance coming from nature to all aspects
my-
of
my-
life.
That's why
my
utopia
question
would
is-
Trade.
never work because if
But
you
my
have
question
everything
is-
given to you, you have no reason to live. So there's.
Well, that's a myth too.
I don't
That
know.
is a myth. That is a myth.
People
myth.
don't become lazy because they're given thing because
I think
they're
they do.
No,
Um,
people become lazy when
well, we
they
brought
are
this up with
anxious.
parents. When your parents
Laziness
shelter you
is a
and
symptom
give
of
you
anxiousness.
everything, right? Then you don't learn how to be a human in society, right? We were talking this
Right.
initial conservative point, right? So you don't learn. You don't know about it.
If
You don't appreciate it.
sure, but that situation is only really applicable when you have time to survive and not learn.
Like also, the whole abundance discussion is a paradigm shift, like in thought. You can't really compare or talk about it in normal terms. It's like what you need, it's there. Housing, food, like it
And this
can
is
be.
us
It
getting
can
away
be.
from our hunter-gatherer
And
instincts, so we're
maybe, I
becoming
don't know.
artificial.
Right,
With
But-
that's the point.
but
That's
wait.
really it. The fundamental point is yes, it's very artificial. So artificial is that it stops reflecting where we actually originated.
And I think
in
that's
the
where
natural
people get
world.
their meaning.
Hold on.
Is
It has to be
creating
artificial at this
tasks,
point.
Getting to their goals.
Well, that's because of a plateau. But
We
that's
can't-
a different.
we can't go
That's a
back.
different. That's a
what I'm
different
saying.
sentiment.
We can't go back to native tribes and hunting and gathering, but we can still
We can use the examples.
we can
of
say that back then they did have abundance. They didn't have to work their ass off.
And by abundance, we don't.
24 hours.
By abundance,
They had
we
what
mean
they needed to survive.
Yeah.
here's what I mean by we mean by abundance. You're a tribe. Like, we're really stepping back in terms of civilization, like really layering off to the basics. If you're in the tribe, you're in the forest, you've been there for a while, obviously it's been sustaining you. What you need exists out there.
Right.
The only stipulation is that you do the work to obtain it.
Yeah.
Right? It might be a lot of hours of work, but it is what you need, and it's
Do the
there,
work.
and it's available.
Put in the time.
Abundant, it's always there. We're removing that disposition from normal living.
Right.
Like, if you live in a city,
Because
you can't go to like
You'll be kicked
yard
out
and-
of anywhere you go. First off, private property.
Right.
It's all private
Right,
property.
So that's
You
the
have no meaning then.
That's the distinction we're making, and now we're trying to say, okay, so now that we build up all of the civilization that completely removed it all, how does abundance even look in this picture?
Right.
What does that look like? For one,
That's
it doesn't
the
look like
the artificiality. It has. There's a part of it that because it is artificial. It's layers on layers.
And then
It's
there's
all abundance, really.
And then there's one stipulation that capital really abhors, is that profit is not what's in demand in any context. Profit is an artificial demand through and through.
Right.
It's outside of everything, all and every human activity that is necessary,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's
so
like the
in this
rewards.
world. So what does that even look like in this world? Well, first of all, it can't look like anything because profit interests will decimate it
A
immediately.
thing. It's
They
a
will
thing.
Destroy it.
Right.
That's a tough
So
one.
so it can't have an umbrella of
Thingness.
unity. It can't be a cult, for example. It's targeted
Right.
immediately.
An organization. That's why we always have to talk about Portal Mountain in terms of like an emergent kind of federation of pseudo-emergent
It's just because you're
organizations.
doing it, I'm doing it, we're doing it. Because
Portal
of that,
Mountain is here.
It's there.
Right.
But is it a real on paper organization? No, because as soon as you do that, it gets erased or swallowed up or whatever, recuperated.
Right.
Right. That's it.
Well, but we're all just part of these, cogs in a machine. It's like,
For the
Right.
system,
For the
that's
system to
exactly
operate.
what it wants us to be.
And that's a
It-
myth, by the way.
The issue
That
is,
we
is
are
that
cogs.
the issue is that if you're a cog in a machine, everything you do is meaningless, and you don't have access to the full machine.
not necessarily because you're needed for that machine to keep going.
You don't have any say over all the work that you do. At the end
Right.
of the day, it's gone. That's what I mean. Like,
But you're
it's
monetized.
taken.
Your worth is monetized by your.
it's laundered through the layer of currency. You get the money,
Yeah.
and then that's it. You got that separation, and
But-
then you use that same separation to get your food,
Right.
and on it goes. Separation, separation after
So
separation
you
after
can
separation.
change how the logistics work, but in the end, you're still monetizing your effort to either a dollar amount or to
At the end
some
of the
kind of
day,
bartering system.
well,
to
well, in
know?
the system, yes. At the end of the day, it's about those currencies.
right.
All winds up in the accounting. Our picture is different, is because the accounting is, yeah, it could exist. It doesn't have to, but it's there if,
Right.
if necessary. But and all the money is doing is creating a barrier to either get the necessities in, or removing the unnecessary out.
Right.
But beyond that, currency has no meaning. So there's like a barrier of
Right.
that is existing that says currency exists here and out, but within here. So this is like trying to rebuild the tribal
That
format,
that abundance that was
the
there,
initial
natural,
abundance inside this membrane.
inside
right?
the existing
So-
structure.
So the membrane acts as like this monetizing barrier
Right.
to get the actual things inside and outside of itself. But internally, it's back to the same principle of this is what's necessary, so you just get that. This is what is necessary for this job, so you get the supplies and you create the whatever is demanded.
Yeah.
So it doesn't become about the profit, it's about the activity. So profit being the only activity that has no meaning except outside, and inside has no profit motive or orientation or any
Profit as an idea is just an idea
Expelled.
coming
Right.
from above. It's not something demanded from the body or anything
So now
dependent.
why? So that you're not a drone, so that you're actually alive, living entity within whatever context you're in.
Yeah.
And the whole money question, the whole survival question extrinsically has nothing to do with you being alive and there. What you do
So-
Your
is
survival is though.
what you do is necessary, and
Yeah.
what happens to you is what you need.
You can't just
Yeah,
cut
that's
yourself.
perception,
You
but-
can't cut yourself off from the economy.
It's more an ideal.
Right.
So there's a
But you can,
there's
you
a
can have
difference
both.
between
You can be a part of society and
Right.
you can be your own.
hence the barrier,
Exactly.
hence the barrier, and the people
Correct.
and the actual individual people representing the barrier is shifting all the time. So you're not talking about a shielded community, if you
Right.
will. You're talking about a community that exists in 1 foot in here, 1 foot out there, and using this barrier as a matter of discipline, if you will, to ensure
Right.
that the inner and the outer
As-
has that distinction.
As a
at least.
medicine to kind of bring what's inside
like a meditation.
back to the
Yeah.
roots,
I
if you
think
will.
I think that's like self-awareness. So
Mhm.
basically, if you recognize
Absolutely.
you can be your own sovereign person and you can be a part of society as well. So
Yep.
you can
Or the
work
recognition that
inside
being
of
a part of
those-
society involves being a sovereign person to begin with.
Right.
To have that really honed in, so that this and that are not actually separate things, right? Like being your own individual person to the fullest extent is being a fully participant member of society. It's a contradiction for a lot of how we tend to think about civilization right now.
society is an emergent thing. We are all part of. We are all replicated beings, kind of like.
Right.
Like you're not stuck in traffic; you are traffic.
Right.
Sort of that sort of idea.
And there are others like us out there, which part of self mastery is the mastery of how to
Recognize that,
connect with other selves and communicate, right?
to understand that
To
you
make society happen.
So,
And then,
yeah.
but then, like once you realize that, you can realize, okay, well, I'm pretty good at this, so I can monetize this ability and be able to make money off of it, aside from my regular
Sure,
job,
that's natural.
right?
I think
You can
a
recognize-
personal aspiration or like what you're good at.
Yeah,
what you
so you want to get ahead.
You
right?
feel not get ahead, but like that. Yes, get
The
ahead of others in the field.
comparison
Maybe,
means less.
like
Yeah.
I am better than everybody else at this. Sure, get ahead, right?
Right.
But really, what you're doing is for the whole, right?
Right.
So it's not a separate like I am getting ahead of the pack.
You get ahead, it gets ahead. There's that
Yeah.
also, that sort of aspect. Because also, if that's not the situation that you're in, again, the question then becomes about meaning. Why are you even participating in something that is just circling a drain? Right? Like,
Well, you don't have to.
What
but
is the meaning?
You need to be able to figure out another way of means.
Hopefully that, and then it comes back to that whole self-awareness.
Transition. This is an idea of transition. It doesn't happen overnight. It's
Right.
being aware of it and then making choices.
It's the build, much like the civilization build up, and then it looks like it happens overnight. This is
Right.
very similar.
Correct.
There's a build up that looks almost invisible once you cross the line.
Right.
Insight is a very interesting thing. It's just like an integration of something, right? It
Yeah.
becomes a part of you.
Once you have like self-awareness, you can kind of like organize your thoughts in a certain way for like a main goal.
Well,
All right. Okay. So you want
well, here's a
to
question.
you want to gain some new skills to be able to move up to a higher position in your job or become more specialized, right? So what's that going to involve? You're going to need to learn
Yeah,
more.
learn that boat
You're
all the
gonna need
time.
to have more drive to.
That's how I negotiate my raises.
Right?
So here's a question. Once you become more self-aware, right? isn't the very first realization of that awareness is the fact that really everybody else is on a spectrum of some form of self-awareness. And
Right.
some people are
Like there's a process, a
some
bigger
people
thing happening.
have an explicit version of it in their minds, and some people don't.
Right.
But really, everybody is on the very same spectrum, and that unifying feeling.
It's a very universalizing kind of
That
thing to
unifying
say.
feeling is that same realization that we're like all one with the universe and all of that kind
We're
of
all
stuff.
we're all fighting against the same odds in a way.
But look at what it does to the perspective. Whereas before, there's different agencies, different entities in the world,
and I'm getting ahead against that person.
acting in competition and trying to overtake each other.
Right.
This normalizes everything into no, everything is actually on the same spectrum and it just is either more mature in it or less mature in it. But it's really a question of the very same fundamental things, and there is no real competition going on. There's only messed up collaboration. Like the dance. There's a dance to be had, but nobody
Yeah.
knows the moves, right?
But
and some
the
people do.
competition drives up the standard. Right.
But the standard is also changing in that competition disappears and it becomes an entire collaborative affair, right? Because the human species in its entirety is not a competitive element on the planet. It's actually a very cooperative one.
Yeah.
Competition is
Right,
more,
like
more
But it would be
nature.
more
it's
like
more-
competition between
it's
tribes.
more like in our
right?
myth, and it's more artificial than we'd like it to be too.
Yeah.
Because we, like, even when you watch sports, at the end of the day, you know, like, if they just helped each other, everybody would get more score, right?
But that's
like,
the
it's
thing.
weird,
There's
but it's
your
there.
team against their team, so it's
But it's an
tribalism,
and it's an artificial setup, though.
Well,
the,
here-
the rules make it artificial.
right.
There's an interesting
That's
thing.
in our nature, though.
the
I believe.
the overview effect felt by
Parts.
astronauts.
There is a nature of us to test the boundary.
Right.
That's the competitive element. But then there's also a secondary
Which we have
nature
to. There's a
return.
function.
But that's
To-
where the
to
self-awareness
reincorporate.
becomes you realize,
And we lost that
your
part.
biggest opponent is yourself.
But
Right?
civilization,
You're competing against yourself to become better than you were
sure.
previously.
Right.
Right?
And not
That's
to
when
like
you realize
put
that
yourself
you're not
on.
my competition.
And-
I'm my own competition.
Yeah.
And even then,
Yeah. That's true.
It doesn't
That's-
have to
that's
be a
good.
competition because it's an
Well,
it's an evolution as well.
That's what
It
it
does,
is.
though. That's like the meaning, though.
So you're not even competing
Yeah,
against
meaning
who
of the
you-
word.
But but even then, you're not competing with who you were because who you were evolved into who you are. And
But-
where's the competition? It's just
Genya.
growth.
It's internal.
Right.
Isn't this the?
But I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like,
yo,
Okay, maybe competition is not the right word then.
isn't
but-
this the journey of increasing
It's a-
coherence?
yes,
Is it not?
it's exactly that. It's exactly that.
Thank you.
What I'm trying to say is that competition plays a cognitive role in setup, like to set up the myth.
Right.
I'm better than I was. But ultimately speaking, there's no better than was, and there's no better than is. There's
degradation, so the opposite
because
must be
there's
true too.
because there's just you in that moment,
Right.
and then there's you in this moment, and there is some narrative out there that says this is better than that,
Yeah.
but it's all like artificial
Well, isn't education
because this isn't that
Um,
and this isn't this, you know, and only the story is the thing that connects it together.
Isn't
And
this
without
all?
the story?
Isn't this
it doesn't
all
matter.
a process of education of things getting better
It's
through
growth.
learning?
It's
Yeah.
growth. It's like
Growth is education, is it not? Natural
Are you
fields.
really better than the
He's
boy
on a
you
roll.
were at 5 years old? Because the boy you were at 5 years
Better?
old is comes
The
from
same
a
thing
completely
is
different
happening.
Yeah, you're
place in
100%
life.
you're better.
But the same process is happening.
How can you say it's better? It's different, yes, but better?
Yeah.
You were 5. Like,
well, okay, maybe certain aspects aren't
Right.
better, but
different,
overall-
yes. Yeah. I'm trying to paint that there doesn't have to be a view of a comparison of better and worse in the case.
To others.
Because the better
You're
part
on the-
grew out of
But that's
whatever's
why I'm
considered
saying
worse.
you're comparing yourself to yourself. You're not comparing yourself to what other people's
fair.
standards are.
That's
Okay.
that's fair.
That's where the
That's fair.
journey of
Yes.
self-improvement.
And
That's what I tried to
and what I'm
acknowledge
saying
there.
and what I'm
That's a
saying
good point.
and I acknowledge all of this, and what I'm saying is that you need an extra narrative to justify that comparison, because without that extra narrative, all you have is this grew out of that, and to say this
Right.
and that is better
And this extra
doesn't
narrative
depend on anything.
you're talking about
Sure.
could be like
It's subjective.
Exactly.
Yeah.
coherence
and-
dynamics.
And the other point being is that if this grew out of that, then you can't really say that this is worse because it led to the better to begin with, right? So
Yeah.
from a different perspective, it was more of an evolution than it was a competition.
But it's all about that journey of struggle and overcoming obstacles.
And growth
right?
is growth as a concept is itself accepted as a given. Like
Right.
everything is growing in nature,
Yeah.
including mentality, including maturity, and it's all a growth. It's like a plant being
Evolution.
watered
It's
slowly.
evolution.
The trick is to recognize that there's a buildup,
Right.
and then once the buildup reaches its threshold, there seems to be what's called a sudden shift, but it's not that sudden.
Right.
It's only because you're ignoring the buildup that led to it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can
And so
you can recognize it.
It
though.
looks like a different place, but it's not at the same time. It is and it isn't. So there's no. It's not like I'm trying to say one way is the right way to look at it.
Right.
There is competition, and then at the same time, it's not even competition.
No.
It's a trick. It's like
Yeah, it's
it's something that's
fallacy kind of.
It's
For
something that's
my,
dual, but it's not.
From my
right?
experience,
It's word that muddied it up, not the process. It's the
Right.
same process, but the words are different.
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm sorry. I got
No, it's
carried
good
away.
to
I got excited.
get different perspectives on things, right? And it's all about how you perceive your own reality, right? So for you to be happy as a person, you're not going to get that way by comparing your progress to somebody else's progress. You're going
Because
to get
it'll
that by
that's going to be a lax.
looking at but you're going to get that by looking at, okay, I've been through these struggles, I conquered them,
Yeah.
right? My struggles are different than your struggles, right?
For sure.
So
Like
you can't compare yourself
when
to
you
what
do,
other people are going
I'm
through.
agreeing
It's
with you
you're
like
Yeah.
100%,
you know.
because as soon as you do what you're saying, as soon as you do compare yourself to others, you're going to compare what you don't have that they do.
right.
So it's never a positive.
It's never a fair comparison either, right?
Exactly.
Because there's always stuff.
It's not fair. It's
Yeah.
never positive,
Right.
and it's about some fucking shit that doesn't matter.
And that's where envy comes in and religious connotations, right? It's a sin,
Those come in to
right?
justify the story, right?
And
It's
pride
like,
is also
uh,
a sin.
Religion is still alive today, mainly because it has stories in it to justify how you feel at the moment. So
Right.
righteous indignation is one hell of a fucking drug. When you feel that you are right and you get to tell somebody else what their
yeah,
fucking problem is.
yeah, that's
Right.
the opposite side of it. Like you're
that
way
hit
better,
of dopamine that
You're so
getting at the
better than
same
them.
time.
Righteousness, yeah.
and like
Righteous indignation.
Sure.
Feeling indignant for philosophical correctness.
Right.
And
that's
Feeling
what
you're above whatever you're.
that's yeah.
this idea
It's
that
a hell of a drug.
this
though.
idea that
Think
you're
about it.
below.
If you think about every time it happened to you,
But that's
Oof.
how all these wars are waged.
you just
because,
like when you're laying into a person.
they're not Christian. They're whatever. So they're inferior
But when you're
in
pissed
their
with a
belief
person,
system, right?
it's just when you're pissed with a person. Have you ever laid into a person when you're pissed at them?
Oh yeah, of course.
That it's a drug. Like if you think back on the
Yeah.
the build up,
Yeah.
the internal quality of the moment, you're going from feeling extremely angry and disappointed and whatever, and you're elevating that to a sense of pleasure of telling them what the fuck they've done.
But I think a lot of it is
Just,
just,
like,
you're
letting it all
projecting
out.
you're projecting all your own insecurities onto
Oh,
them,
absolutely, yeah.
right? Because it's
Absolutely.
like stuff that you recognize in yourself that you feel resentful about.
Oh,
usually, right?
It's always going
Or
to be
like
that.
qualities, you know,
like
you
as
can-
soon as you said anything out of that whole righteous indignation, guess what? You've talked
Comes
about
back on you.
yourself.
Yeah.
You've literally talked about every single thing you hate about yourself.
Yeah.
And you just witnessed it in that other person, and you just couldn't stand the fact
And
that
you knew it
more of this,
so intimately
more
that
of
you were
this
able to
exists.
speak on it.
You're so,
You need to-
you're so related.
And you're killing
You know it.
yourself
Yeah.
in that moment,
Yeah.
not them.
Yeah, exactly.
course.
But your mind spins it that you're the
Yeah.
one in the right.
Yeah, we call that misplaced empathy.
So good.
It's when you take sympathy is when you have it for others.
Right.
Empathy is when you relate to others as yourself.
Mhm.
So in one case you recognize the self in them.
Right.
The other case you don't recognize the self in them. So misplaced empathy is when you recognize the self in them and then twist it around to not being yourself.
Right.
So
It's you.
so you've put yourself in them,
Yeah.
said this is not me, this needs to be destroyed.
Yeah.
Classic.
And that's why the enemy isn't them. It's actually inside of you.
Classic.
Misplaced empathy.
Classic
Right.
projection.
It's
That's
it's a
it's
a rever-
projecting your own.
it's a
insecurities.
reversal of the literal actual relationship that is actually existent, and it's got twisted so bad that it's inversed.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
And what's interesting about this is that our quote-unquote civilized world is built that way because, and I'm going to like just use your own experience here. Have you noticed how intrusive our way of dealing with each other is? Everybody's entirely in everybody else's business to the point of where they neglect their own. So how well you're doing with your expectations and all of that stuff. But it's almost like to the point of absolute neglect of the self. And so everybody keeps everybody else on their toes,
Right.
but nobody is actually concerned with their own
unless
elements,
they
except-
get reminded
except for if they've stepped on other toes.
when their boss or
and
something.
then the weasel.
Their boss is pissed, so now they know about it.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah. That's,
But parenting.
it's all external,
the way,
outside.
The way parents are intrusive with their kids, helicoptering them.
Right. Yeah.
Why I'm bringing this up is that in comparison, and we have some functional evidence of this. We have people that used to be in that background and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know if you know anything about the Inuits, is that their parenting style is so uncoercive that it had been a subject of study
Right.
to the point of like, how does it even work? Because what they were doing with their kids is that they don't actually implement any instructional regime for them,
Right.
and only really help out for things that they can't get to themselves, or they would clearly put themselves in danger.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. We've talked about this before.
yeah, and the strangest thing is that over time, like the one example was the mother was teaching her kid about hurting other people.
Right.
And the way she did that is she had her 2-year-old throw rocks at her.
Right.
And she encouraged him to do it, and he would throw him, and he would hurt her, and she would react. So he got to see the consequences of his actions in action.
Right.
And so
It's not just don't do that. You're gonna hurt someone.
right,
Okay,
it's
this
not
is
the
what
words,
happens.
it's the experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we
And
get
so the long story short, in the Inuit community, despite the fact that they have extremely hard living conditions for hunting and obtaining food, they don't express anger as adults. Like, it's so ingrained in them that anger is something that a child only does because they don't know how to control themselves.
it. Right. Yeah.
That no matter what happens, if the hunt goes wrong, like say they spent hours on the line, that's the actual example they gave. They spent hours building the hook, the line, the hook to get the seal.
Right.
It broke. Like
Boom.
hours in.
Gone.
Right.
And the only response was from somebody is like, they're all sitting there going, looking at it.
Oh, back to the drawing.
Yeah,
board.
let's fix it up.
Yeah. Well,
That's
because
it.
anger doesn't
That's it.
serves no purpose, right?
Fix it up.
And this is like I said, the only reason I know about this is that it's this extreme that it's been noticed by studies, and people are going, how are
How?
they so controlled
How?
Right.
with this lack of discipline, exercising extrinsic push down discipline,
Right.
and they don't get the
Right.
point that it's an emergent element. It's in the human nature. You can trust the crowd,
Right.
which is opposite to what we're told. I don't know if you know Noam Chomsky or any of those guys, but they're talking
Someone.
the concept of manufactured consent, the way advertising works in the Western world and in general. It's all about
It's
trying
the
to
Achilles heel of democracy.
It's about pushing the emotional buttons to get you to like the product that you don't need,
Okay.
right? Because prior to 20th century, the way commercials worked were basically technical descriptions of items.
Right.
Manufactured consent comes in, and it becomes an entirely emotional game of like, you should look like this. This
Oh,
is
you
the
need this.
emotional. So one of the things that they've done initially was get women to smoke as a sign of female freedom. And in the 20s, there was like an entire march, and
Yeah.
all the women in the march were instructed to light up a cigarette in the street because it was unacceptable for women to be smoking in public.
Right.
And then it was so easy to
That's
get.
like a women's rights
and so
issue now.
and so
About consumerism.
the entire campaign was literally about how smoking is
and
a sign of freedom.
your consumer base doubles overnight.
It did,
Yeah.
and
that's
it
probably
did.
the main reason they do
All
that.
profits doubled, quadrupled.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying about manufactured consent, and it's an entirely opposing point of view
Yeah,
of
sure.
the masses, in that the masses need to be controlled and manipulated versus no, the masses is where everything else emerges from.
Right.
Obviously, to put ourselves in that position is making us
okay.
as a target. As
Yeah.
So,
that's
Zhenya.
consumerism and producing
Yeah.
like a fake demand. Right.
Genya.
Mm-hmm.
Propaganda, Edward Bernays, and all that.
forget who
These are the modern father of propaganda in the 1900s.
Was that the guy with the manufactured consent? I don't think that was him.
This is who Chomsky would have been pointing at.
People, yeah.
What I'm saying is, this is just the priest class expanded to modern time,
Right.
right? It's the same thing. The one to control the overall perspective.
Right.
Like who can simply use old tactics of the church in modern mass media,
Right. Creating ideals.
just moving the masses for whatever's happening to whatever end. Yep, creating ideas,
Ideals.
fucking with the money supply,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Poo-pooing precious metals and moving towards getting off that. Then in '72 they did finally, right?
Now,
Like
now we're doing that with gas and oil.
well, the oil, the petrodollar system is collapsing. That's one way of saying the current times. Petrodollar, yep. And so, where could it go from here? Who knows? There's a lot of existing ideas of like, oh, it'll be a currency or a basket of currencies, or like a more multipolar world,
Right.
maybe of like banking. But still, it's all central banking. Still, it's fucked.
Mm-hmm.
Like every individual should have their own currency. If you want to look at money
Yeah.
as a trade, this is the intricacy that it needs to go to be fair and open, and like everybody is responsible for their own currency.
Right.
How valuable is your work, your time, right?
Yeah.
Don't just launder that away to
Right.
to like, oh, I'm Canadian, so I have Canadian dollars. I work for Canadian dollars, right?
Right.
And that's a really tough kind of proposition, but that's kind of like the world we're moving into of responsibility, right? Responsibility for your own currency. Hey, Shania, individual currencies, that everybody is responsible for their own currency. There's no
okay.
global single one ledger global thing. It's everybody has their own currency. What do you think about?
It's still a laundering mechanism.
Sure, but you need to communicate with your neighborhood and who is economically participating, or is this
So,
like a stopgap? That'd be the question.
It is a stopgap, and the reason is very simple. Is because you don't get to a unified mythology with that. The laundering element,
You're still subject to like a quantification mechanism.
specifically
for
fragmentation,
And-
siloing,
and it's to do with who trusts you. Like, let's say somebody really hates you, but like they're big in the network, they
Right.
can fuck you over, right? And
So-
this kind of stuff.
And here's another example from tribal societies that keeps getting overlooked in modern society. Crime. Crime in a tribal society does not mean removal from the tribe. Like, we jail people, right? In a tribal society, when you do that, you actually lose a capable individual
Right.
that can participate in hunting, in gathering, and everything else. So it was never the practice of tribes, and again, the Inuit is my primary
So
example
we're talking
because
about
we have
we're talking
access to
about
them.
we're talking about justice right now. Right?
Yeah, like what would their punishment be then?
Yeah, so these people are never shunned from society the same way, and the way we find in our legal system.
So how
There's-
would their behavior be corrected so that they wouldn't do?
There's kind of a question of that.
They're watched more, but they still participate in sharing.
No.
They still participate in hunting. They still
I'll throw
participate-
something in there that I heard about. It was that in this type of society,
They have a
if there's a
reconciliation
perpetrator, let's say everybody knows that somebody did something bad, right?
ritual.
The whole community
they talk
knows.
to 'em.
Now, okay, that something was done wrong to another family. Let's say another person who is part of another family. That the justice here is something was done. There must be balance, right? This is the thing, because we don't all know each other so well. We're a society. We're big.
Yeah.
There must be justice.
And it's-
So what that justice is that the whole family of this person being quote ashamed of the action taken, and like not like just saying how could you, but like everybody cares the fuck out of this guy. Like, you've done something. How could this happen? How could we let somebody drag so low in our family that you actually committed a crime of stealing from this family? Shame on all of us, right? And so that becomes
there's that ownership.
It becomes a bigger thing.
The other thing that they do is they start off with reconciliation, and what that means is that they get the perpetrator and the victim in a conversation, a mediated conversation, as to like, okay, well, how do we set this
What
right
do we do from here?
so that
What do people want? Right? That makes sense.
that's the general gist of the difference. Anyway,
But this
it's
is
idealized. So.
This is different from an even more idealized law system in which it's like, okay, you have court, judge, lawyers, da da da.
well, in our law system,
This has been done. Charges
our
have been
law
pressed.
system is very interesting in that
Did they do the law, or did they break the law or not?
check this out though. In our law system, the smallest infraction can get you into a lot of trouble.
Well,
Right.
what's defined as the smallest infraction?
You just being poor. If you're entangled with the legal system and being poor, that's it. Like,
Well,
it's
You,
done.
maybe you just can't afford a good lawyer, but
That's one of the definitions of
Yeah.
being poor.
Yeah.
Literally, one of the things
Yeah.
that happens with poor people.
but you're
It's more
you're
more expensive to be poor.
given representation from the state, so it's not really.
Who doesn't give a
Of course it's
shit
not.
about you? You're just another
This
number, though.
Yo,
Yeah, but if
This
you
is
really
all
weren't
market.
guilty of anything,
But my,
you're really not guilty, and you
but
didn't
this
do
isn't.
anything
But this isn't the
wrong.
main point I was trying to get to. The point is that in our system, smaller infractions can what do you call
some
it?
ducks flying out there.
Trigger
Little one.
Migrating.
extreme responses from the system.
Right.
While to get rewards from the system, you have to be extraordinary to get anywhere. So rewards are held back, and punishment is readily available. That's the reality of our legal system. And the less money you have, the more readily available the punishment, and the less accessible the reward.
Potentially.
Very potentially. It's not a mystery that it is more expensive to be poor.
Hell yeah.
For example, shoes. People can't afford good pairs of shoes. Shitty pairs of shoes are gone in a year.
You
When
buy
you're-
them
when you're
every
poor,
year.
You buy them every year.
They break.
They break. You spend way more more
Because you
money
can't spend 3 times as much money to buy a good pair of shoes, which last 10
times
years.
as long. Yeah,
Well,
10 times as long,
but-
right? Correct.
it's simple things. Who pays bank fees?
The poor.
People who don't have
who
money.
keep getting fucked in their overdraft and all this and that, whatever.
It is fundamentally more expensive to
They're
be
paying this
poor.
$50 here, 50 there.
Who gets discounts?
Not necessarily in the
Who gets
immediate, but in the
discounts?
long
Who gets
run.
free shit? Celebrities. People who have money get free shit.
Yeah.
Who doesn't?
But they deserve it. They're at the top.
Yeah, and it's like a give and take thing as well.
It's disgusting
because
though.
they share
It is
their
this
wealth amongst
blatant-
each other
it is
the
that
same
blatant,
way
though.
A lot of times.
It is that blatant, and we're still like somehow entrapped by thinking somehow this is correct.
It's like a pseudo
What?
meritocracy where people think that it's a meritocracy based on merit, but there's no merit there. It's a
It's nowhere to
laundered.
be found.
The merit is based on a laundered quantity of money. How
Well,
much?
and
How much
then
money you have, etc.
I think wealth accumulation and stuff is like a learned behavior as well because
And you're raised
you
into
know,
it, born into
typically,
it.
Yeah,
Prep
you're-
school.
You can't
You're like,
accumulate.
okay,
you can't
well-
accumulate wealth if nobody did it for you beforehand.
Or nobody showed you how. That's the problem.
No,
it's not about
but there's-
people doing
there's
it
no-
for you.
there-
Okay, look at how many fucking broke immigrants come here and then become millionaires. So you can shove that up your ass. That whole
Dude,
oh, I was
they're all
poor,
white.
so I can't become rich. No,
They're all
that's
white.
bullshit. Fuck off, white. That's
Look at the
bullshit.
number. No,
look
look.
at Asians. Look at fucking Pakistanis. Look at all them. They're not white.
So
China-
it does.
China-
it does happen that
China-
millionaires.
China's a little
millionaires
different.
come from the ditch. Is that what you're saying? It does happen in
Yeah,
capitalist
most
society.
more
Okay,
more
I'll agree.
people that are
I'll grant
millionaires.
that. I don't know.
come
Do you
from
argue? Do
nothing
you say no?
than-
No, you're wrong then, Jenny, because
it's not statistically
of,
significant.
of course.
No, you're in a prison
This
in
is
your own mind.
this is why it's
because
a
of that.
myth for
Yeah.
most people though. We're all a prisoner of the capitalist mindset. The temporarily inconvenienced millionaire who we all are, and deep inside we know that, but we're poor right now just temporarily because we're gonna make it big if we try real hard. But the system is fucked against those who don't have
Anything.
the
Sure.
the quantity,
Sure, but-
property, money, power, people, connections,
Yeah.
connections,
And-
man.
and-
Connections,
and-
sure.
and-
that
and
can
that
be
does
a
help. That
that
does
can
help,
be a
100%.
godsend.
And dude,
I'm not saying-
the
I'm
only,
not
the,
dismissing
only
that.
reason, the only reason I'm saying they're fundamentally mostly white. It's not just
No,
because
it's not true. Don't
just
say that
because
shit.
they
Yeah,
are.
that's-
It's not just
what
because
does
they
that
are.
have to do with anything?
It
'Cause
has
they're
everything. It has a
white.
lot to do
My
with
white-
everything.
No,
My
Where-
blacks. No, you're
where-
racist.
where-
Jenny. That's-
where-
you're,
where
you're
do-
racist.
No,
Okay, drop
look
it then.
look at Europe and you look at the rest of the world.
Okay.
We're messing with you.
Europe has a significant headway when it comes to acceptance.
What do you mean?
I mean,
Accepting themselves? Don't we
No.
all? Aren't we all tribal? Go to
If
Africa.
you come here-
go to
if-
South
dude.
Africa. Be a white in South Africa right now. You're fucked.
You're derailing the point
You are
entirely.
fucked.
You're
No,
derailing.
it can go both ways.
But
It's
you
fine.
can't look at things
Overall,
from both ways.
overall,
If you're-
yes, you're
if you're
probably
white
right.
in South
You're-
Africa, you're
You're right in
fucked.
an overall sense of like prejudice and all
There,
that.
there is
But
a
prejudice is
significant amount
everywhere.
of prejudice.
It's all things.
China
It's
is
not,
a story
he's
unto
white.
its own.
Don't
China
throw he's white.
China is
into
a
this.
story
Yeah,
unto
that's
its
not part
own.
of the argument.
It's an isolated space in which the Chinese economy has gone through its own
Be an
bubble.
African farmer right now. Who is white?
I can guarantee you right now.
South African.
I can guarantee you right now that the entire Asian push of success that's happening in BC is drying up. Like
In DC?
BC,
BC?
British Columbia.
What's happening there? I didn't know.
There's an
anything about it.
entire real estate push from Chinese
I didn't hear. Oh yeah,
over
yeah,
the
yeah.
last few years.
Well,
But the
Toronto,
entire Chinese
dude,
real
it's everywhere.
But the entire Chinese real estate bubble is fundamentally gone. There's trillions missing from the economy. As
right
far as
now,
China.
it's
Oh yeah,
collapsing.
that's fucking up.
It's
for
done.
COVID. Yeah.
So that little tiny bubble that displaced the numbers of Asians to white ratios of success is so tiny that it's not worth really talking about.
Okay, so
The relationship between Europe and America is so fundamentally
where did this
entrenched.
okay,
go?
but you look at
How
why
is-
they're successful. Okay.
Immigration is not successful for everybody.
This is great.
Okay, leave.
It was successful for me. I'm one of the
I
success
don't even know what's
stories.
happening right now.
We're
So you
talking
guys
about
have to explain it to me.
He was talking about how immigrants can prosper here. I'm making the
Yeah,
point that
they could
they
become
tend
It's
to-
off
millionaire.
of hard work.
They
It's
tend to
not
be
about
white.
This
race,
is
it's-
no. Hold
it
on,
is.
hold on.
It
For
is.
Zhenya,
No.
first off, point of order. That's the American dream. That's what it's called, literally. Okay, now continue.
Right. So based off of your effort, not your skin color. not
Okay,
this
now
and that, right?
continue with your point. Like, okay, you're good,
the
solid.
The effort argument.
What's your rebuke?
The effort argument works really well for the white segment of immigration. They do in fact see and experience the American dream. If you know anything about trying to immigrate here, you need to have a lot of fucking money to just get into the country and be allowed to go into it.
Not
We had,
necessarily.
dude, we had to do it.
Back
we had
then,
we had to have an account full.
Okay.
for
Up
years.
to,
Now-
we had to
Yeah.
have at least 10 grand to begin with,
Here's-
like just to get in.
Dude.
That's
because
like
you
the
need
minimum.
to have like a year of.
Think about this. Think about how much it takes effort in, say, Europe or any significantly white, if you will, part of the world to
Okay.
obtain that amount versus everywhere else. Number one. Number
Sure.
two, you get in here. If you are white and you have a background, it's taken seriously.
Well, that's the next thing too. You need
If
skills.
if you're a
You need
doctor
skills,
from
right?
India, if you're a doctor from India,
Yeah.
you're probably like, one of the billions of people there. What the fuck you got to represent? It doesn't matter what their actual education is. It's already
Right.
a division.
Well, it's not necessarily transferable either for stuff like that, right? You need to be a doctor by our standards.
And those standards are
Going to school here.
they're skewed. They're skewed. If you didn't have an education from a particular part of the world,
Right.
that's how you're judged.
But it's not necessarily transferable, yeah, of course.
So
I can't deny that.
again, how is this not playing into the entire? If you're from this part of the world, you're less significant, and if you're from that part of the world, you're more
That's
significant.
and you're making the assumption that because you're from this part of the world,
Yeah.
you're white or
No, I'm
you're
saying-
black
I'm
or
saying
you're
this is
whatever.
how-
It
no,
doesn't
okay.
matter
It's
your
not the
skin
assumption that
color.
I'm making. I'm
The-
saying-
your skin color has nothing to do
Dude,
with
this
that,
is
though.
how it plays out.
Okay.
Maybe
Over
it's
and over and
Yo,
over.
yo.
It's just how it plays
do
out.
things play out in most countries in the world where the culture is mono? It plays out like good luck fucking trying to do what you just said in that country.
Right.
It's not as
Like
okay.
we're
If we're,
first
ta-
off
if, if
not,
we're
we
taking a
can't,
random
like,
country on
we
as
got
a
in
comparison,
Canada.
if we're
We got
going
things
for
going
comparison,
okay.
if
at
we're
least,
going for
right?
comparison,
Culturally,
are we
what do you
talking
think?
about-
Are we bad? Canada's bad.
no,
Is United States
No.
worse or better?
You-
Culturally, integrationally wise, like if
Re-
that's
not-
what we're talking about.
not relevant.
Let's scale other countries other than us, because I think we're the beacons of like it's supposed to be freedom and like like.
Yes, you're
Anybody-
trying.
I'm-
You're
I'm
trying.
saying anybody-
You're trying to.
We're all
compare-
kind of the same people with the same rights,
You're
and
trying
we
to
shouldn't be
compare
discriminated.
Dude,
We have a sense of justice.
you're comparing false equivalences.
Look at every other country aside from the
false
West.
equivalences.
I know.
On the Western side,
I know it's
you're
a false
trying-
equivalence. Look at
Absol-
natives, indigenous peoples, cultures. These they're not on the same plane. They're not the opposite.
Well, but they
They're
get
different.
all the leg up advantages. Say, okay, maybe they start off worse in their reservations living, but they get free
Everything-
education. They don't have to pay taxes. They fucking this and that and that. So they have every opportunity to get further ahead. Yet they don't because they're trapped in their own prison of their own
But
mind.
meanwhile, everything has been run over by the system. It's all
Are
run
you
over.
real-
Capitalism
do
is
you-
everywhere.
Do you
It's all
fucking hear yourselves?
under the system.
Do you hear yourselves?
Except
Yeah.
for the nature and the great wide
First of all,
existence
to your
of,
point,
of everything
to
in the
your
environment
point,
that exists
what
around
what
us.
is exactly the mental trap that you're referring to?
Well, because their parents or whoever aren't doing shit with their lives. They're not setting a good example. They're fucking alcoholics. They're drug addicts. They're this and that, right? This is my
So
future that I
generational
see
trauma.
for myself.
Generational
Because
trauma.
I'm not
Wait.
saying this is a generalization. I'm not saying they're all like this, but there is a huge.
Who is they?
Say indigenous people as an example. Okay, so
In North America.
if they're
let's
okay, so
or
and
You're setting up a
about-
you're setting
we're
up a
talking
stage
about-
here. You can't
under
defend.
under
I can
colonial
defend it all.
under colonial
So-
attack.
Okay, yeah, we're going way back now.
Well, that's
but-
what the context is where it started. We're talking
Okay,
about.
so but I'm saying, as a person, once they realize they're a sovereign person, they've got access to education. They've got access to this and that. They don't.
Yo,
need
yo,
to
yo,
say
you mean
in
when
their
they're acclimated
community
to the white culture?
You're talking about already
Or
in the
whatever
way
society they're
yo,
in. Yes.
Jenny, he's talking about the guild already, like in the future. We're
Right.
This is like
No.
We're
It's
not there yet,
It's
and
not
thi-
that.
these-
It's not that because there's an entire arc missing from the entire narrative. They're not there because that's who they are. You don't become a society of alcoholics based on some form of your own creation mental prison. There's a trajectory. There's a trajectory that goes from having an entire civilization of people
and this
getting
generational trauma.
moved
I think that's a
from
cool term.
from their existence into an artificially branded existence,
Right.
created by an entirely foreign alien
welfare system.
in
Like-
the entire
Yeah.
thing.
Yo,
So-
Estonia.
So but the point
Same
is there
thing,
is
I
that they
think.
didn't get there on their own. They were pushed in that direction. And now to blame anything on the pushed as their capacity to respond is not quite correct is asinine.
So you don't think they have any responsibility for their own actions? It's all the
That's
societal
not the
pressure that
argument.
got them there.
That's not the argument.
Okay.
The argument is that when everything is removed, meaning wise, from your existence, to exist for a system that removed that meaning
Mhm.
is nowhere here or there.
Right.
That is the idea that this could even happen for them is part of that very, very intrusive way of thinking to begin with. These people have been manipulated into their situation and now they're being asked
course.
to accept it and only function within the parameters that they've been given.
Now,
Nobody's saying they can't just live off the land
Yo.
and do whatever.
Yo,
There's
city
so
state,
much wrong with this.
Yo, Zhenya, city state, tribe to city state. That we're back at that original.
It's the same process.
We're back at the original.
It's the same problem.
The original pattern.
Yes, it is the same original pattern. I'm not saying it's not. But it's wrong everywhere it is. It is the same wrongness. It's not, there's no...
I'm not saying the
just because it
system's
repeats
perfect.
itself, it doesn't mean that it needs to
Right.
or it should.
Exactly.
And
That's
like
what I'm
it's,
trying to say.
and it's nobody's fault
That's
all I'm
and
trying
all
to say.
that.
And we agree. But
Nobody
you can't,
started
you
it.
can't say that they are, like, they come from a place of alcoholism and all of that.
And it's their
That is not-
responsibility
it's-
to.
that is more of a reaction than it is a function of them. It's a reaction to what happened to them.
But that's what I'm saying is that okay, it's all like a cycle, right? If you don't see somebody doing good and
But
breaking these patterns,
It's the side that wronged them that needs to fucking
So,
handle that
there is-
responsibility,
No.
not their side.
Yo,
No, I
dust.
think it
There
is
there is
side.
actually this kind of like anti-racism thing where you're like, okay, I know that usually people look at people of this color, they're like looking at them like strange, like
That's a
taking
fact.
double
It's a bigotry
takes
of
and all
low
that.
expectations.
That's
So
a fact.
just
What it is.
just to like in your daily
That's there.
life, be aware. Even yourself, your subconscious tells you, "Oh, look again," or whatever. You know, it is like, or like interact with this person differently or treat them somehow differently. So you have there is like to just like know that people can be amazing and awesome and good. Doesn't matter what they look like. Doesn't we've
100%,
all
yeah.
seen somebody who looks like something, and
Yeah.
it's like
That's them.
we've never even seen anything like that, and it's like amazing.
Right. Like,
Right?
don't judge a book by its cover, right?
Exactly. So, but there is ingrained kind of patterning, I guess, or whatever, of your daily life, and like things are new, some things are not common, and this and that. It's
Sure.
natural to like to look extra into that, or this or that, or
Right.
whatever, or even like for fears to take over in that. But I guess when it comes to social organization, we have to pay special attention not to allow those kind of patterns to interfere with our relationship with each other, people as people, because we can all organize socially together
Right.
at a deeper level, much deeper than any of us ever thought,
For
like
sure.
on the DNA level,
Well, we've got
the
more in
social
common
DNA
than just our skin
level, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
Skin deep
color,
ones,
We
right?
can transcend all
like
of
you
it,
can't
yeah.
tell by looking at somebody. Like, yeah, someone can just pull a gun and you're dead. At any no, we don't know, right?
And look,
That's the thing. White, black, anybody like
Would
not
bleed,
not
bleed
to
red.
put fear, but
White, black would bleed red. That's
Yeah,
literally.
that's-
I'm
and we're
on
all-
the-
man. And
That,
this is
yes.
this to me
We're
is
fighting different
to
battles, but we're all in this
to
survival
to present
battle
yourself, your body as a living sacrifice, is to know that, and yet to engage in the world
Yep.
in that freedom,
Hello?
right?
Yep.
That's man.
We're
we
just
got
in the middle of a conversation.
mythical right there.
But all I'm trying to say is you can transcend wherever you come
Too
from
soon?
and elevate yourself to become whatever you
I
want to
can't
be.
hear you.
You're not trapped in this,
I like-
I can't do anything
Hmm?
because I'm black,
No.
I'm fucking whatever, I'm
Well,
this
that's not never
impoverished
what I guess the
kinda downtrodden
conversation is
group.
about. But like that inner, yes, we all have maybe disabilities or
Probably,
this
yeah.
or that. We all have our own unique. As you opened up the set with
Right,
our own experience of our own
Okay.
lives.
Yeah.
Right. It's all different.
right.
We can't directly relate. We
No,
can
we
only
don't.
relate through like mythology and metaphor, and this
I
kind
know.
of stuff. Just telling stories, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Love you.
Yep.
All right.
Damn. Has it been a sesh or what?
Almost. Almost.
Yep.
So, I just wanted to say, like, my perspective is from the success story of everything, right? Like, I have no
Success.
I,
You mean
I,
like
I am part of the
positivity.
I'm
You're
part of
thinking
I'm part of
positive?
the immigrant culture, if you will, that my parents easily fit through the requirements and planted themselves in here.
Right.
Easy. So
Because
I'm
they
def-
are white.
I definitely do not share in the negative experience that I'm describing. It's something that I'm aware of because I've seen the same thing not happen for other people.
Sure.
And the way it didn't happen is always the same fucking filth that is ingrained in it. It's who people listen to. For example, my wife had a friend from high school. She was there on like a program from Japan. She was supposed to be at her wedding. Everything was normal. Some fuckery happened with passports and whatever. They deported before. Just deported her.
Okay.
Her legal case was fucking normal. There was no reason for it to happen.
Right.
The only reason it happened is because nobody gave a shit.
Well, there must have been some kind of process that she
There
didn't,
was
didn't extend her.
there was a
visa,
process. She
didn't-
did all of the things she was told to everything.
Right.
To the letter. She followed every instruction and they still fucked her off. Why? Because they didn't give a shit. It wasn't even about poverty. It wasn't about anything. It's just that they wouldn't look at it.
Okay. I mean, sure there's lots of cases like that, but I mean, what does that have to do with your
They add
situation?
up. It doesn't. I get skipped over because people look at me and they're, oh, you know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Maybe.
I mean, it happens on the
Yeah.
male-female divide too.
Well, again,
easily, between me and
again,
my wife.
we can flip this over to any country. You as a white guy in 90% of existing countries, you feel that exact experience
most
is
of-
yours. Now.
But in most
So,
of the places where it's
well,
been colonized,
maybe not exact. I don't know. Fuck, I don't know.
most
man.
places has been colonized. You still get special protection essentially.
Yeah.
There's the
Well,
South
we're all
Africa, for
white, so we
example.
can't
the
really.
capitalist.
South Africa, you're only in danger if you step off the reserve kind of thing.
Right.
Where it's like that in most places. But why is the reserve so safe? There's privilege there.
I guess we're all three of us are white, so you can't really necessarily make assumptions on somebody else, some other race's
Hard to
experience.
speak on it.
We,
Well,
we,
of
we,
course,
we can
yeah.
recognize though. We can recognize the
Can
fact
try
that,
to.
that there is a way to exist in this world that isn't justified at all. And we have the power to see that mythology. We can see the same injustice done to us that's done to them for the same reasons.
Mostly.
If we place ourselves in their shoes.
Right. That's empathy.
Crack-a-lackin'.
And not misplaced in this time around.
Right.
Misplaced is when you want to destroy it.
Well, but what I'm seeing is like a bigotry of low expectations because they're indigenous, so
I'm
you
not
don't
t-
expect
there's
them
n- there's
to
no
live
special
in the same
pedestal.
kind of standards as.
Well, there's no special pedestal that I'm putting them on. I'm just trying to take ours a little bit down to below. Like,
But if you don't view somebody as an equal, then you're going to be
it's more
inherently racist.
It's
as
more
well.
convoluted.
But
than
what
that.
do you mean? Are you
What I'm saying
selecting? You're
is that-
selecting one race out to be taken down a little bit.
No.
In relation to all others.
No.
How do you accomplish that?
When the overarching claim is that there's civility and savagery, my perspective is
I
that
don't see
we're
this
taking,
as a race
we
issue,
should, we
man.
should
It's
take
culture. It's culture issue.
Yeah, mostly.
It's not fucking race.
It's culture, but
this
where you grew up.
part of
I know that it's intertwined. Like, okay, when you
Sure.
experience of being the outsider, outcast, yeah, you're the wrong race. I
Part-
get that it's race in that way,
part-
There's
right?
classism
But
as
it's
well.
culture.
There's an
It's
aspect
probably
of
bigger
Western
than,
culture.
than the race.
There's an aspect of Western
Many isms.
cultures that places the West on a pedestal above all others.
Because it works better.
Says who?
Right now,
Says who?
economically,
Says
according to
Societies.
accumulation of riches.
That is not a claim that you can make.
This
Because
is-
every time,
dude,
every
it's all
every
capitalism.
but
Why are we
every
even
place-
talking this
every,
shit, man?
Every
still?
place you can you want to talk about it not working better there, you'll find that it's been a place that's exploited to move resources from there to the place where it seems to be working.
right.
That's an illusion. Because it's not that these places aren't working, it's that these places are being shat on.
They're being exploited.
Garbage is dumped in them. Their environment is turned to shit.
Right.
Here's pre-processed food. It's already been digested. Here. Have at it. Of course these places are not gonna look the same.
But at the same time, it's anybody's responsibility to recognize the situation they're in and start making social changes to the world around them.
That's why I'm trying to take the pedestal down a notch and say, instead of trying to put other races, places, cultures, whatever, on the same pedestal as the white culture, take the
Western
all-
culture.
predominant-
we're all
Northern
on the
culture.
same.
it is predominantly white just by
Not anymore, man.
geographically.
You're
It's a
talking about-
geographical thing.
You're talking about coherence again.
Instead of taking the approach of bringing the rest of them up, you need to take this one down a notch and say, hey, it's part of this mess.
Right.
That's the key. It's actually a contributor, if not one of the main key contributors
Who
to
is?
the shittiness.
This
why
is-
why
you
should we have to
can't-
bring
the
our
West-
standards
the
down?
West-
Why can't their standards
You
just
can't
come up?
reason with this kind of
Balance.
logic without putting
Balance.
in education
If you
and
overshoot,
immunity to ideology,
if you overshoot to
or
one
you
side,
will
the other side
stick to
caves.
it.
Right.
It is not an instantaneous solution. It has to be a gradual one. And,
But if
and-
we
and
can
it
give them
starts
the
with-
tools to develop their societies to
it takes
come up.
So if you take that approach, you also need to take the secondary approach that I'm suggesting of bringing the other part down, because the leveling will not happen if only the one side is
What
asked
do you
to
mean
come up.
down?
To bring
Like-
themselves up technologically, to bring themselves up to speed.
Like what do they call that?
And you can't do that if the resources are drained away.
Yeah.
There's like a statistical term for
So there
like
needs to be a balance. Not only do they need to come up, but yes, we do need to bring a notch down to what we've done.
so you're like talking
We're not
systemically like removing candidates because they're from a certain race.
I'm talking about placing constraints, actually. Just taking things out of the picture that don't need to be done for the sake of profit, but and replacing them with the things that need to be done for the sake of needing to be done.
So like you're hiring somebody on a board of directors and the must be a certain race or not.
Yeah. I don't
So-
know.
But that,
one
no,
or-
no. How is that?
'Cause they
how,
do that.
How does that
That's-
follow? That's not what I'm talking about.
Okay,
That's
what are you
equity.
talking about then?
That's what you're
You-
talking
you-
about is
You,
equity.
you don't do quotas. Quotas is a gimmick, a representational gimmick, to say we have
To have an appearance.
We,
The token.
we've taken a token
Yeah.
out of that word, but it doesn't actually change shit. What I'm talking about is about not taking a token, but integrating. So you bring the up levels up, the bottom levels up, the top levels down, and integrating each other, where it's all actually a level playing field. Not. You still need to take something down and
Not
bring
really
something
sure
up.
I understand.
that's
What is the playing
exactly.
field? The field of play. I don't
It's the same.
understand.
It's the same playing field as you
what's
get with
being
the manufactured consent.
taken down.
Manufactured consent is playing into the same problem, where you have an abstraction of the ideal, and you're trying to slot whatever's underneath it into that ideal. Well, it's artificial in its entirety through and through. What you need to do is, in fact, not manufacture consent and allow the DNA of the masses to unify and coagulate into a single structure.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, again, you have a sense of bringing the bottom layer up and a top layer down. So it's the same scenario, it's the same playing field in every way in every which way, shape, or form we're looking at it. The existence structure is too
And then-
hierarchical,
and then you have-
we need to consolidate those
And then you have
layers,
worldviews such as religious ones that are
justifying it.
completely like exploited as to like rewards and punishments, right? Just arbitrarily fucking the whole thing and being like, okay, my DNA, because I'm this type of person from this region, my religion is like that, and you
Yeah.
just fuck
But
with shit.
But we're also making the assumption that all this excess and all this wealth that we've gained is what makes us happy. But maybe they have realized you don't need all this shit to make you happy. As long as you're meeting your...
happens to people that do that kind of realization
They're
general?
autonomous.
No,
They don't. They realize,
They get poor.
or they're just happy with their living situation, right? If they
Could
if
be.
they're meeting.
Could be.
So no, maybe you're just making an assumption that, oh, because we're living this way, this is the way you need to live, whereas they have already realized that you don't need all that bullshit, that material stuff, right? And that's introducing their religion.
Every pocket of those kinds of people that realize that has been eliminated out of the ongoing history.
If by nothing else, then by just simply being pushed out by the mass of the capitalist machine
Right.
to replicate.
But we've got our own ideals of like, okay, well, you're not doing well in life if you don't have your own house and your own car and this and that and your TV and all material things you really don't need, right? And you measure your success by these false fucking gods, right?
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
It's-
As opposed to like some kind of inner transformation or
And then
inner maturity, if you will.
You're like, oh, these people, look at these people down here, they're so devolved and like they're living like fucking savages and this and that. And well, it's like, no, maybe you're just not living in the right way either, right? They've got everything they need. They're living happy, but you're just
right?
you're comparing your own self-worth and your own expectations of what success looks like onto them, right?
Falling for the meaning laundry scheme
Right.
that money is everything, or
Yeah.
property, or well, like land seems important, right? But property, what's the difference between land and property?
Well,
This is like between the mind and the body. The mind trying to control the body in some ways, like to be its own reality.
Right.
Meanwhile, there's yin and the yang, right? The two kind of, you could say, material and immaterial ways of looking at stuff.
right.
Yeah, and that's all like Portal Mountain, the model and all that kind of stuff. Like just trying to connect those, the yin and the yang.
Yeah.
Right. That what model we are presenting at the top just keeps emerging from the bottom. What you're looking at is a snapshot of different charts and stuff that we've made out of experience, right? Because we're thinking it through and all that, right?
Yeah.
And we want to connect to academia and all these different books and
To try and talk
people,
about it, yeah.
So to have translation ability, to talk in different languages,
Right.
right? But yeah, it's all there because we've walked through it for the last 5,
10
6,
years.
7, in different intensities, years, right?
Yeah.
But everybody's goals in life is different, right? I mean,
Yeah.
survival is obviously the top. And
The
that's
narrative.
related to
This- this-
everybody.
The
Okay.
story that it's
But
expressed
how you
in.
live.
But do you okay? To counterpoint, the story seems different in content, but all of these stories tend to have a similar theme: growth, maturity, a seed planted into some story.
This is
And,
like
and an evolution of that seed
like
into whatever
the common idea
whatever
among
it
a
is
lot
is
of
going
myths.
to evolve into, right?
A lot of different myths to share the same structure. That's what you're trying to point at, right?
Right.
and,
that's why
and
they
it's
have
the same,
mythology,
and
so
it's
it's relatable to
and it's the
the
same
common person.
and it's even in our modern myths about like going to school, going to getting a career, becoming a professional.
Right.
It's
That's how you
the
measure
same.
your success in life, though. Is
So we've given
this path.
so we've given like an artificial outside scale as to what growth now means,
right.
removing the idea of you decide what that is.
Right, and it's
It's
different
not-
for every
it's
person.
now
It's
this
the standard
template.
now.
Yeah, and that's
And
the
it's
kind of like the battle.
supposed to be a universal model.
And the question
Right.
now I have is, if you're just following a checklist over there, is there real maturation or is there a checklist?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Because people go for that checklist easily. Like that's what we
But
see.
dude, the checklist.
But how many people around you do you see who are mature?
The
Right.
checklist,
It's
A few.
children.
for one,
It's children with technical abilities.
Yeah.
is supposed to be
Nobody's actually
constructed by masters.
Everything is growing except the people.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is growing.
You got the wrong
Not the people.
checklist.
And we're trying to point out
Well, that's
you don't-
the
you need
classic
growth in
church.
the people too.
The classic church. Any
Well,
church
what
you go
defines
to,
growth, though?
any
That's
church you,
subjective.
dude, any church you go to, it's
We got
defined by what
templates.
they're not doing.
The natural world is a beautiful template. It
Except for the gems.
It tends to, give you the idea of the seed, the sprouting plant, the mature plant, and all of those things.
We've
you
got,
can
by
see
the way,
the whole picture of like
20
where
minutes.
is it going, how's it going,
20 minutes,
what is it-
gentlemen.
yeah, I heard you.
Just
And
saying.
what's it doing with itself? And as I say, an apple tree, always the same template. Cherry tree, always the same template. The human
Based
tree,
off of the
and the human
environment.
tree is not that far off. It's really not.
Right.
Yes, we're individuals, sure. The contents in there, vastly different. Memories in there, vastly different, right? You had your events, I had mine, he had his.
Yeah.
Sure,
Traumas, whatever.
but the seed, we're from the same seed.
Uh-huh.
We're from the same soil. We're from the same air. We're from the same water.
We're all humans.
We're from there is that aspect of, as different as we are,
Right.
a lot of it is not that different. And it's, why can't we find a language to talk about that similarity? We can talk about all the differences we want, but the
Right.
similarity we can't. That's the goal. That's the real point of the work.
Yeah.
To find that commonality, despite the fact that you're not me.
Right.
And yes, we use English and interpret English in a totally different way. But on top of English, there's an experiential world that we both share,
Uh-huh.
and that mythology, that story out there, however it's articulated,
Right.
is not different. So we separated from the bottom, but we still come back to the top. And
Uh-huh.
if we don't have the full picture, are we really mature?
Right.
Because what else could our maturity be really about not that?
If not to have our own understandings reflect
Back down.
the structure of who we are in the
it's-
layers, the nature, what we're a part of,
Completeness.
all the things that make us up.
Yeah, if you feel fulfilled, basically, right? And that's
And that's so universal. Everybody talks about being complete.
yeah.
Nobody talks about the details of what that looks like.
Right.
But it looks like
Well,
everybody else.
On the surface, somebody could totally have their shit together, but underneath,
Right.
they're freaking out and
But
they're
your
not
completeness-
happy at
but
all.
your completeness-
Just because if somebody's wealthy and somebody's got everything they could ever want doesn't make them happy.
No.
So your completeness is exactly the same as my completeness. It's just that the story and the way it's told and everything else about it will look slightly different.
But it means different things to
but the
different
myth,
people, though.
but the myth is the same.
Mhm.
It's still the myth of growth. It's still the myth of becoming yourself. It's still the myth of growing into yourself,
Right.
and that never changes.
Right.
And so, despite that separation, there's a consolidation at the top, and we keep missing that top point because we keep saying, "Oh, it's Christianity. Oh, it's economics. Oh, it's this. It's that. Is the no. They're all the same thing, trying to say the same story in different words."
It's all about potential, I think. Really, like, people are limited in a certain way, but then at the same time, once you realize you can do almost anything you want, figure out the steps to get there.
But then realizing everybody else can do almost everything they want, and so
Right.
they're not different.
Right. But there's
And that
obviously
potential is
something
everywhere.
holding people back from reaching their potential.
And there's
do you ever get to your full potential? I don't think so. Right?
Oh man, can we ever?
That requires an extrinsic narrative. You need a story to tell yourself if you've reached your potential or not.
Right.
And without the story, does the question even make sense?
That's deep.
Like competition, without the underlying narrative, competition dissolves into cooperation. Really, even in
I
opposing,
think it still needs to
even
be
in
there.
opposing teams, they're cooperating to concede to a specific end score.
Right.
So even a competition is a dance.
There's cooperation in competition, right?
Of course, even driving, there's cooperation, even though you're competing for who gets there fastest.
Right, sure.
But you're still
You're
not
s-
crashing.
You shouldn't be competing for who gets there fastest. You should be competing for who gets to the spots safest.
The safest.
Into your lane or whatever the fuck you're
That
changing.
goes without
Whatever
saying.
difference you're trying to
yeah,
make.
if you're not optimizing for safety, you're just creating giant delays
Yeah, you're just being reckless.
when you go to the hospital and all that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's all subjective, I think. You know, what people's metrics for success are, right? It's
What if subjectivity and objectivity were part of the same milieu of confusion? Like, what's subjective is subjective in some sense, and what's subjective is objective in another sense.
right.
Because the problem, I guess, well, it always is that part of our digestion of reality happens in its representational form. So we don't necessarily deal with reality as is, but what we deal with is what we think it is, right? So we're dealing with our mind content before we're dealing with whatever reality is really sending in our direction,
Yeah.
right? So it's the story we tell ourselves instead of the actual story that's weaving itself.
Which goes back to perception, which
Mhm.
is even deeper than that,
Well,
too, right?
well, we need that because we need to survive.
Yeah.
So if we couldn't stitch the story together at all,
Right.
we'd also be fucking useless.
Right.
But
And I guess then there's like discrimination, right? It's a good thing and it's a bad thing because
so
it
the
can serve you in a good way,
and so
and it
maturity,
can also limit you
Yeah.
in other ways.
and
right?
maturity is basically recognizing which is the weaving representational story I'm allowing myself to integrate with
Right.
versus the superfluous extra shit that's everywhere on
Right.
top of that, which makes it a kind of a conservative sort of path
Yeah.
at the end of the day. But if you notice anything about our conversation is that we're also very extremely liberal in the sense of what that means.
Right.
So conservative does not mean condensed view of the world and only this applies. So like not extremist sort of speak.
It's more traditional though, right? It's based off of things that have worked in the past and keeping.
But
kind
what
of
we are really
maintaining
conservative
tradition.
about
More
is
like
maintaining the
a site,
liberality.
a view on the stack of causality as a thing to be concerned with.
Yeah.
That's what
So,
you
like,
can
one of
serve.
our
You
stacks-
can serve life itself, kind of
One of our stacks is dealing with what we call constraint.
through modeling.
So,
through modeling.
So you have all of these options, so we need to constrain.
With that, gentlemen, I do need to go. It is time.
Yeah, I gotta get.
I hate to cut it short, but yeah, I had to call it. We're now
I have
peace
a
out.
good
beer
chat.
to finish.
Some sips
Good
or two.
Good to talk about things like that.
Yeah, good to have you by, Dustman. Glad you weren't shy or nothing.
Yeah.
You know, come on right
So,
up.
What I wanted to say there is that
Final words.
conservative
of
and
the
liberals tends to be on the opposite sides of the spectrum.
Opposites, you say?
Like you
Well,
have
but,
your
but
conservatives,
they
you have your
both need to
liberals.
coexist, I think.
Well,
Because
the-
without one, you can't have
well,
the
this
other as
this
well.
this view, instead of going left and right, it's kind of like above and below.
Right.
It just basically goes like fuck you and fuck you.
But you want to stay off the extremes of either end of that.
And so
as well.
and so to the one side, it actually looks like the other side in the extreme,
Right.
and on the other side, it looks like the other side to the extreme.
Right.
And so you're basically neither, and you're both at the same time.
Right.
That's kind
Yeah,
of
you don't want to like pigeonhole yourself into a corner,
yeah. So the
right? And then just be defined as this one thing. It's like you can be many things at the same time.
the way I like to call it is fundamental egalitarianism.
Right.
So you know egalitarianism.
Anyway.
Everything is permissible.
Right.
So fundamental, which is nothing is permissible,
Mm-hmm.
egalitarianism. So very hard line in on that. Fundamentally, we are egalitarian,
Right.
and egalitarian fundamentalism.
Right.
The classic.
So it's like it confuses the shit out of both
Kind of
perspectives.
contradictory
Yeah.
ideas, yeah.
Yeah, but it makes sense if
It
you
is
put
a
it all
fundamentalism in terms of fundamental guilds in
together.
the
Like
model.
we won't look. We won't stray off that point,
Right.
if you will.
It emerges.
But that
we're
point-
fundamental on the emergence.
But the point is that egalitarianism is the rule of the law. Like
Right.
you don't escape that.
Sounds like a
So-
permissive thing.
So the contradiction comes in that we're very unpermissive on permissive.
It's like we
Sounds like you're just ideologues.
we want to point to the constraints of life. That's the conservative part of it. That's what
It's
allows
very liberal.
That's what allows the liberal to be on top of that, to emerge on top of that.
And be whatever.
Right.
Because this is what you liberals can't fuck up. Do not fuck it up. Okay, go ahead. Now go do your thing. That's where the marriage
traditionally,
is.
the liberal mindset is like the more creative and coming up with new ideas and this and that, and then the conservative
No,
end of it
it-
is the implementation of
You can't be a liberal without understanding the conservative.
right.
Your liberal is pointless. It's often
It's
to nowhere.
willy-nilly is what it means. It's like it can go all over the place and just shit all over the place.
Right. But
So
that's
yeah,
how
you
new
need to
things come
constrain.
about, is
You
right?
need to put a fucking. You need to take its nuts and fucking nail it down.
Right.
But at the same time, if you nail too many nuts down, you can't fucking move.
Right. So that's where the balance comes in between the two, right?
So what are we conserving?
It
What-
should all
what
be
are we
easily
liberal along?
understandable too, as to what will be lost if you don't take care of that constraint or this constraint or that constraint.
Right.
Take care of it, or this will be lost.
Degeneration.
Period. This is the construction of the order of life, the kingdom of God, and all this.
See, the problem the conservatives will have
One
with
on
this
top
system,
of another.
the problem the conservatives will have with this system is that the actual protocols are liberal. Even though the point is to be very conservative with what kind of protocols to allow, what is allowed is basically not the kind of restrictive system that is generally associated with conservatism.
And-
It points to liberalism
And
like
what I meant to point to is the holonic organization, where parts are wholes. Every part is sovereign to itself, and
Right.
it is a component, valid. And
So you're not a cog in,
Or-
the wheel, in the machine. So what you're doing actually is meaningful for what
right,
you're doing.
that's very different than
It
the
just happens to also.
the
part of the
obfuscated
whole.
meta narrative where you just paid money to do X, Y, Z, and you don't know.
And you don't have
Yeah.
access to the full thing.
Right, and this is the guild we are trying to shelter and learn how to shelter it and to describe it and through protocols. Like this is how people flock on behavior and all that.
Yeah.
All
And
ideally.
we are very close to going over the limit. But any last, final? Anybody has a vibes to share? Like we got 5 minutes.
It all goes back to into your own self-perception of what your role is in society or your role in this organization is, right?
Your role.
Ephemerally. If you can take that idea and
This is like the
change
mythical.
it moment by
this
moment.
is the myth layer. I think.
This is it now, but this is that later.
Mm-hmm.
If you can take on role after role after role after role, if you can change your identities the way you change your identity from work to house to shopper to whatever,
Right.
The way you interact with the world is changing every time you change your context, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea to take that on and
Well-
and basically be like, this is my template for existence
So-
itself, so to speak. So
you
moment to
you
moment.
understand that moment to
Always
moment
switches.
thing, Dustin, because I understand you are of guild membership level, whereas a participant wouldn't necessarily understood what's meant by that.
A participant.
How to step
A participant
back.
is stuck
How
in
to
the role.
how to take on a hat or put on a hat, take
But yeah,
off.
people don't even
You know,
realize
it's like
they're in the game. though.
the game is the model.
When
You're a member.
when you see people switch roles as a matter of recognition, mental process, that's membership. When you feel like people are stuck in their roles because they have to
Participant.
be,
They're
that is
doing something
that is what we call
of
participation.
told to them, but they don't get the bigger picture.
So they have different. So each participant will have their own myth, each individual myth.
Mhm.
Membership says, "Oh, all of these myths are the same myth, reiterated different ways."
Right.
And so
All of our
it
different experiences.
It normalizes. A member sees everybody else as a member. Different degrees of
Right.
coherence,
Different parts of the process, the journey,
abilities,
the journey of increase
not-
in coherence, as we
but
call
not
it.
everybody's the same. Whereas a participant is like, I am me, you are you, this is that, this is this. Everything is separate. It's not part of the same thing.
Right.
So membership is mainly just like a mental jump of like, yeah, there are different things in the same thematic concert. And because of that,
Pardon me.
when you're a member, everyone else becomes a member.
Mhm.
But it's not because you got them into your club, it's because they're at a different participatory level than your cognitive ability to capture
Right.
the language, right? To capture it in a language. Describe what they're doing. So when you have the description of the language
Mastery.
that makes everybody a member, you're a member.
Right.
It's mental.
But also
it is
that-
mental gymnastics.
Like
Absolutely.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
intuition to that too, but then the mastery ability to
Well, it's like knowing if
Resonate.
somebody's fucking knows how to cut wood or not. If they know what they're doing, you can see it, right? If you
Sure.
don't, if they don't know what they're doing, you can see hesitancy. You can see where they're trying to make choices, decisions.
Confidence.
They're
No,
not.
don't-
they're
don't
not,
bring it
they're-
up,
They're
don't
not
bring
in
it
the
up.
club. They're not in that club yet. Of like, I just know.
Right. They
Right.
don't have the confidence. It's like a
But
self-
but you will know, like when you see a person that knows, you don't doubt it, right? Like
Right.
it's not, it's the way they do it. It's not what they do. It's the way they do it, right?
Mhm.
And that's the same thing with membership. It's like you can kind of see they're part of that club. They know.
and the
They
weird
know.
part is
Self-awareness.
the weird part is, Dustin, it's not about what they're doing, it's about what they are not doing anymore. So they've started understanding the hidden reality, and they're not doing certain mistakes. That's how you tell. But
That's
there's
what
no
we're
there's
saying,
no positive
constraints.
way of saying they are.
It's what they're not
They
doing,
know
yeah.
what they're doing. It's you see, oh, they fucked that up. Okay, they don't get this or that.
Yeah, I think
Right.
a lot of it's like a confidence you would have.
Mm. Growth.
Right.
It's the same idea. Maturity, growth.
Being comfortable
all
within
of
your own
those
skin.
evolving. Yeah.
Well,
it's
that,
a very nature based, if you will.
Pretty much
for that
truly
way.
is it for the stream and the recording today. We're up on 4 hours.
Okay.
Starting from the morning, and Dustman, so happy to have you.
Yeah, hopefully I didn't get you guys too
Oh
far off.
man,
Oh,
no,
that was
we're
cool. It's great, man.
we were able to, I think, to round off the discussion of the past few episodes, if you will.
You're,
It's kind
you're my like stranger litmus test because I don't talk to you a lot.
Sure.
So every time I talk and I see if I'm making sense or am I not making sense, I can always
Yeah.
use
But-
that to adjust.
I'll take the role of the layperson, sure.
Don't underestimate how weird Dustin is, though.
Oh,
There-
yeah.
the fact
don't
that
do it.
no,
And-
I don't
and with that-
because you stay here. The fact that you stay here it says a lot.
It does,
My
yes.
It really does.
He projects a natural curiosity.
Well,
Yeah,
look,
we're
man,
all in this journey of
most people
self-discovery,
can't.
man.
Most people
Yeah,
can't
man.
stand me, including my own father. So
Yeah, but we love you.
So just
We
so,
love
so
you,
just,
man.
So
We
just
love you.
understand that he doesn't have enough patience to even hear any of the sound.
And
Right.
cutting